America's own people, and voters, including Republicans, aren't very happy about the content of the so-called big, beautiful bill.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we open the lines to talk smoking. Cigarettes are making a comeback in film and TV as France, of all places, does their best to ban the practice in public. Who'd ever thought the French would do such a thing when a vision of a man full of ennui with a beret and a cigarette is the picture that comes up in your mind when you think of the word French. So we'll talk with you about nicotine culture. Americans love their vapes and their Zyn packs billed as safer alternatives, but they're just so uncool. We'll open the lines, smoking and you. It's all ahead on the 11 o'clock hour, BPR and GBH and NEPM.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Authorities are searching for any survivors of the Air India crash in western India today. 242 people were aboard, and it has not been confirmed if anyone survived. NPR's Dia Hadid reports from Mumbai. The plane crashed almost immediately after takeoff.
Footage aired by a local outlet here called Press Trust of India showed the plane sinking over a residential quarter of the western Indian city of Ahmedabad. And then there was just a ball of fire.
NPR's Dia Hadid reporting. The jet is a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. The National Transportation Safety Board is sending a U.S. team to help in the investigation. An overnight curfew expired earlier today in Los Angeles. It's intended to reduce the number of confrontations between police and demonstrators protesting federal immigration raids. Steve Futterman reports.
The sounds of downtown L.A. during the curfew. Vehicles are on the road, but for a second night, no protesters. City officials say the curfew is reducing tensions. Reducing but not eliminating. Wednesday night, just before the curfew began, protesters battled with police right near City Hall. The police, some on horseback, used flashbangs to disperse the crowd, and there were arrests. Another group opposing the Trump administration's immigration policies gathered outside the curfew zone near LA's Koreatown. Law enforcement ordered them to leave. When they didn't, there were additional arrests. For NPR News, I'm Steve Futterman in Los Angeles.
A federal judge says he could order Mahmoud Khalil released from federal custody as soon as this week. The State Department is trying to deport the former Columbia University graduate student over his pro-Palestinian activism. NPR's Adrian Florido reports.
Khalil's lawyers have been arguing that Secretary of State Marco Rubio's decision to deport Khalil because of his activism was an unconstitutional violation of his right to free speech. Last month, Judge Michael Farbiars ruled that Khalil is likely to prevail in court on that argument. And because of that, the judge has now ruled that the government cannot keep Khalil detained. But he gave the government until Friday to appeal, so it's not clear when Khalil might be released. It's nonetheless a huge victory for Khalil. He's been at a detention center in rural Louisiana since ICE agents arrested him in New York 3 months ago as part of President Trump's crackdown on student protesters. Adrian Florido, NPR News.
The UN's nuclear watchdog agency says Iran is out of compliance with its nuclear obligations. The finding by the IAEA could trigger new international sanctions against Iran. The Iranian government has responded. Officials in Tehran say they will create a new uranium enrichment facility in a secure location. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is pushing to investigate whether Harvard University violated federal sanctions by collaborating on a health insurance conference in China. If so, the New York Times reports it may have included officials blacklisted by U.S. government. The report says Rubio signed off on a recommendation to the Treasury Department last month to open this investigation, which experts and former Treasury officials say is an unusual attempt from a cabinet secretary to target a domestic entity for sanction enforcement. President Trump, of course, has sought for months to impose his political agenda on Harvard by reshaping its curriculum and admissions and hiring practices. One of the top arts organizations on Cape Cod has learned that it's lost National Endowment for the Arts grant for the current year and next year after receiving the money every year for the past 3 years. Cape Cod Times reports that Julie Wake, the executive director of the Arts Foundation of Cape Cod, sent a letter to artists and art organizations on the Cape and Islands telling them their NEA grant applications were canceled. 2 grants would have brought to the total amount from the NEA to Cape Cod's main umbrella arts organization to more than $250,000 since 2022. In sports, Red Sox off today. They're resting up for a weekend series with the Yankees. The Indiana Pacers rallied to beat the OK City Thunder, taking a 2-1 lead in the NBA Finals Series. In Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Finals tonight, Florida leads Edmonton 2-1. 79 degrees in Boston. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Doris Duke Foundation, which aims to support the well-being of people and the planet for a more creative, equitable, and sustainable future. And listeners like you who donate to this NPR station.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio on GBH and NEPM. Marjorie, that's the first mistake right out of the box. Jim Browdy.
No, you got
and
through
Marjorie
like 9
Egan.
words. That was not bad. I think it's a good
That's
start.
right. Well, I'm very nervous. I'm going to be talking to Chuck Todd in a minute.
Yeah,
I'm nervous.
he's a pretty
Okay, we're
big
streaming
deal,
at
actually,
youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. On June 25th, we're going to be at the Boston Public Library from 11 to 12. Ask the Governor with Maura Healey.
Yeah.
Hello, Jim.
I'm Jim Marjorie. If it wasn't clear, and we don't know who she is.
Should, of course, be Marjorie Jim.
Okay.
But that'll never happen.
Fine. Thank you. Up first this hour via Zoom, political analyst Chuck Todd. That is his actual name. He's the host of the Chuck Toddcast, which you can find at thechucktoddcast.com or youtube.com/@thechucktoddcast. Chuck's the former moderator of NBC's Meet the Press and is the host of a brand new show Sunday nights. It premiered this week, actually. Sunday Night with Chuck Todd on the platform Newsphere, Noosphere. Hello there, Chuck Todd.
Hello there. I've been accused of a fake name, changing my name.
Oh, yeah?
Chuck Todd's not a real name, and that's a stage name. And I'm like, okay. I mean, like,
Well, it is pretty good. It's great.
It is what it is. I mean, our joke though is it turns out the original Todds were TOD. In Wales, so like most good American immigrants, we added letters to our last name.
Well, while we're on the subject of names, before we get to the topic at hand, since I don't know if you ever heard this from our commercial days, on one show, Chuck Todd, I repeat, one show, Marjorie called me by her former husband's name, her sister's, this is true, we have a reel of this,
my sister
and
Liz.
the best, her dog's name. That's all in
Yes.
one 3-hour
I have to
show.
tell you, my wife does this. She literally goes through all the names. Whether she's going with my son, she'll be like, the 2 dogs, and like she'll do that to my son, she'll do that to me. She goes through all the names until she hits the right one.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, I think Jim did resemble a peanut. That was my dog's
Harry
name.
the dog, best dog
Yeah,
from sea to sea.
Harry the Peanut.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
anyway, to get back to the real news here, we have been talking, obviously, for days about what's going on in Los Angeles with the military there, the National Guard, the Marines there, whether this is some kind of distraction from the so-called big, beautiful bill that the president's trying to pass, or if this is a trial run for what could go on in so-called sanctuary cities around the country. What do you think?
To try to predict whether this is a sideshow, a shiny metal object, or the North Star of this administration, I do think that they don't. I think people like Stephen Miller have plans and have agendas. I think sometimes Trump sort of, decides, okay, we'll do this now in this moment. But look, I mean, I think that, just follow Miller's rhetoric on social media. I mean, he really is hardliner under describes what he is when it comes to who he thinks is an American. And he clearly is not a believer that America is a nation of immigrants. There's the way he talks about it, right? There's this venom in him in how he describes it. It's really and so he's designed the policy, right? it is intentionally divisive. It is look at the little things they've done, and this has totally gone under noticed, not necessarily underreported. But they're really frustrated that Biden deported more people than they did so far, right? It is gnawing at him, gnaws at Miller, I think, more than Trump. So what did they do? They took away temporary protected status on a whole slew of immigrant groups. Why? Because they needed to expand the pool of people they could deport.
Yeah.
They had run out of people. Think about how just sort of cruel that is. Well, we need to up the numbers. So sorry, Venezuelans. And, you're starting to see, there's some local Venezuelans. I follow this story pretty closely because I'm a Miami guy. And the Venezuelan community down there is like, oh, we didn't think he was going to do this. We supported him. We didn't think he was going to target us.
Yeah.
Right? It's always, we didn't think he was going to come after us. And, look, I saw yesterday, one of the criticisms I was leveling against them was the fact that this felt like they were only targeting blue states, but they're actually, they went after a meatpacking plant in Omaha earlier this week. And the guy who runs the company was like, well, we played by, we're following all the rules. We have E-Verify, everybody here. You didn't come to us. Oh, by the way, we gave all this money to the Trump fund and all this stuff. And and apparently the guy says to him, well, E-Verify doesn't work.
Oh, wow.
You're like, oh, well, it doesn't work? Is that news to people? Or is that just this administration has decided it's not working so they can up the numbers on and make it seem as if they're deporting more people than are necessary to deport? Look, I do think the unintended consequence, the hit on our economy in about 6 months is going to be, is between that. This is, you sit here and you're like, my God, all they do is screw up the economy. Whether it's on the tariff business, which China is just sort of it's humiliating how much China's owning us in this trade back and forth. And then you have what we're doing by deporting all these migrants, which is going to have a huge impact on our economy in the next 6 months. I don't think people fully realize it.
Marjorie wants to stay on L.A., as do I, but you mentioned Stephen Miller in passing there. Terry Moran, a lead longtime reporter for ABC, was fired. The post that he put up and then took down included saying things like Stephen Miller's a world-class hater, goes on and on and on. Should he have been fired?
I think he violated ABC policy. Now, the question is, should he have been fired? Should he have been suspended? Yeah. I'm sorry. You do. We all had, look, when I was at NBC, you knew what the rules were about social media, right? You are not representing Terry Moran. You're representing ABC News. I wasn't representing Chuck Todd. You're representing NBC News. So, two things can be true at the same time, right? He could violate that policy. But, here's where I'm skeptical of how they did this. His contract was coming up. Do we really think they were going to renew it? Nobody's contract's getting renewed in our business, okay? All right, that's just a fact, right? If you've been around longer than 10 years, you're not getting renewed because you're too expensive. So they were likely, and anybody that does get renewed is taking a massive pay cut. So I don't believe ABC that this was the reason they didn't renew his contract. Okay. I don't believe that part of it. But I thought, the guidelines are clear. So he made it personal, and he's speaking on behalf of ABC News. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have a First Amendment right to do this. That doesn't mean I think that ABC is trying to, the way they sacrificed him, right, at the altar of Trump. I don't believe the firing part. I don't buy that I would bet he was not going to get renewed, period, regardless of this incident. So I do think firing was extreme. So if they really were going to keep him, then suspending was a more appropriate action.
We're talking to Chuck Todd.
We're talking to Chuck Todd. And Governor Gavin Newsom of California, he called Trump a stone-cold liar about saying he didn't warn him about the troops going to Los Angeles, and Trump has called him news scum. So they're having somewhat of a spat. But he was on the New York Times podcast this morning talking about the theater of Trump's actions in Los Angeles. And
by the way, I can't keep up with all the places Gavin Newsom's showing up.
Well,
like, wow, he's on the Daily this morning. You're like, oh, sorry, I missed that one.
Yeah.
Like, you're like, wow, he is showing up everywhere.
Yeah.
That's for sure. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
He's running for president. I think we can all guess that. But I think he did touch on part of what setting even some considerable numbers of independents and even some Republicans about the cruelty of what we're seeing in the effort to deport people. He's talking about a pregnant woman. Here he is.
You had a nine-month pregnant woman arrested. People are disappearing. Disappearing. They don't know where they are. They can't find them in the United States of America. They can't find them at the detention facility. We're finding out people are in Texas. People are in Louisiana. No access to counsel.
From their original place in Los Angeles.
From Donald Trump, from Stephen Miller, from Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem, who just months ago was sickened by the notion that Biden, there was some rumor, may come in and federalize her National Guard. And she said, what about freedom? What about states' rights? That same Kristi Noem. It's serious. These are authoritarian tendencies. This is thuggish behavior.
Anyway, he touched on something, like I said. A lot of people wanted the border shut down. It's almost shut down. Lots of people didn't like this rush of people coming over the disorganization. I'm not sure they were ready for the 9-month pregnant woman being arrested.
Look, I mean, I've said this before about there are goals that Trump has stated, right, when it comes to the border, when it comes to bringing manufacturing back, when it comes that people agree with. You know, yes, there should be borders, and yes, there should be this or that. It's how he goes about doing it, right? Sometimes there's full incompetency, right? Like the tariffs. Like, this couldn't be more incompetent. The management of the U.S. economy has been a train wreck. Then there is the intentional cruelty, right, that is going on with immigration and with what they're doing. And there is this belief in Trump world, and this is, we've done the whole George Orwell metaphor for quite a while now. This is the week that I felt the first time we were living in an Orwellian timeline, because I don't know about you, but do you believe any picture you're seeing out of LA?
No,
we've been talking about that actually all week.
It's hard,
and it's really I'm not saying that just to oh, isn't that funny? No, this is really disconcerting. I've got a bunch of friends and contacts and sources that live in LA, and I'm talking to all of them simply to try to get my own sense of what's actually happening versus what you're seeing. And there's sort of all these different realities that different people are living in. And I think this is an incorrect reality that Trump and MAGA world are living in, but they live in this world where they think this is popular, that they think that they're being cheered on. And, I think the vast majority of Americans are very uncomfortable with this. We saw this the first time with the Muslim ban. It's not like there isn't plenty of Americans that are skeptical of Islam. Okay, let's be really frank here, right? Not comfortable working with a lot of Muslim nations. And yet that Muslim ban was unpopular, right? I say that I do think that the Trump administration underestimates Americans' collective humanity and empathy, and I think that this is, I think this will continue to be unpopular. But you know what this is covering up, which I think is arguably is as bad of a story as what we're seeing in LA, is the intentional destruction of public health by RFK Jr.
Yeah.
What is happening at HHS and with vaccines, our federal government is no longer trustworthy about our health. They are intentionally putting our kids in harm's way. This is again, there are different ways to look at it. Nobody's putting a gun to our heads and telling us not to take vaccines. Instead, they're doing something worse, right? They're using the power and the influence and the trustworthiness of the American government, which in the healthcare space was pretty good. Are you more likely to buy something that was FDA approved or not, right? That means something to Americans. Yep. I have to tell you right now, if I see anything that's FDA approved right now that's come through since 2025, I'm skeptical. I don't want to touch. I wouldn't shake Robert Kennedy's hand for fear he's got some infectious disease that he's going to shed because he swims in polluted waters and drinks unpasteurized milk. I do. I would bathe in Purell before I would even breathe the same air that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. breathes. That's how scary I think it is of what he is doing to public health right now. And I'm, talk about where's the outrage. This is one of those things that we're going to have kids that die. We already have people dying of measles. We beat measles.
Yeah.
And Kennedy said, no. Let's let it spread again.
Well, I don't want to be optimistic. We're going to talk, by the way, for listeners. Michael Curry, the head of the League of Community Health Centers on the national board of the NAACP, is joining us in the 12 o'clock hour. We're going to go into some depth in the latest decisions by RFK Jr. But I don't want to once again be proven wrong about the proverbial worm turning. But there's this Quinnipiac poll.
I think the worm's eating.
Well, it's a very
Sorry, you bring up the worm.
I wish I
RFK.
could
the worm is eating.
I'm embarrassed to say I wasn't even thinking of that.
Yeah,
38%.
well done.
Well, it wasn't intentionally, so it wasn't well done. 38% of voters approve of what Donald Trump is handling his job. Just listen to these issues. A Quinnipiac poll again. Immigration issues, 54% disapprove. Deportations, 56 disapprove. Economy, 56 disapprove. Universities, I'm stunned, 54 disapprove. Russia, Ukraine, 57% disapprove. Are things changing, or is just a bad moment in time for Donald Trump, Chuck Todd?
No, I mean, I've been saying this since the start. I mean, I really do. And I do think the tariffs were the beginning of this for him,
too.
right? Like that was his Afghanistan withdrawal moment, right? For Biden, I think I've said this with you guys before, Biden never really recovered from the dip, the public opinion hit he took for the management of that. Yeah. And I think that's what tariffs were for Trump, and now everything else, right? Again, it goes to competency. And this, look, I do think the challenge for Democrats and the challenge for any opponents of Trump is what do you focus on and how do you do it, right? If you focus on him and character, that's a loser. But if you focus on competency and corruption, I think that potentially is more of a winner because it is more about how is it impacting you. Right? When you talk about Donald Trump's character, at the end of the day, it's still about Donald Trump. But when you talk about his inability to make the economy work for you, his inability to protect your kids from infectious disease, his inability to stop Putin from killing indiscriminately in Ukraine, right? Like, I do think that the challenge is going to be, for Democrats, in some ways, you got to narrow your focus, right? But you've got to sort of get at, because it's not the goals of Trump that you want to run against. It's his inability to do it. It's his inability to make your life better. And so I think, but it's easier said than done. And I think it's a target-rich environment. But if you sort of try to do a little bit of everything, you may not impact the voter on anything.
So you mentioned tariffs there as the starting point of this whole thing. I think the 90th day is July 9th. 90 deals in 90 days. We're going to have 90 deals?
Has there been one?
I missed it if we have.
I mean, every deal has been sort of, well, they've got an agreement in principle.
Yeah.
Well, they answered our call, I believe. They did take our call. No, we do not have any deals in
we are literally,
days.
the negotiations with China are literally just like the movie Blazing Saddles, where the sheriff pulls the gun on himself. Like, that to me is the metaphor. We literally pulled a gun on ourselves with China. And they're like, China's like, okay, go ahead, shoot.
So we're almost out of time here, but in the couple of minutes we have left, what's going to happen? What do you predict with the No Kings protests all across the country on Saturday, coexisting with the military rally in D.C.?
Well, I'm very, Trump threatened protesters, right? He said, very
strong force.
that's like waving a red flag.
Yeah.
To a bull, right? He's playing Matador there. I think this. First of all, I think these protesters. These are going to be the first big protests. I think he's had quite a week. This was organized a couple weeks, right? This has been on the calendar for a while, this protest movement. If you were the protest organizers and you were to say, what could Trump do in the lead up to this protest day in order to get attention for us on this protest? Oh, how about sending the military to Los Angeles? How about having a self-serving military parade, right? I mean, the amount of disruption he's causing those of us that live in the DMV. Do you know he's shutting down National Airport for hours?
I do know.
For this birthday party.
Yeah.
They're shutting half the city down from travel, even though we're talking literally 6-block radius where this is. I heard a stat the other night. By the way, we're rolling tanks through D.C.
Yep.
I heard a stat that literally the most wasteful piece of military equipment on Earth these days are tanks. Do you know what their lifespan is in the Russia-Ukraine war these days? It's something like 3.5 days.
Wow.
I mean, the point is that tanks are just sort of, that's the 20th century warfare. This isn't how it works anymore. And instead, they're just expensive toys, right? And all we're going to do is rip up our streets. I'm expecting a bigger turnout for the protesters. And I'm concerned he is unstable enough to overreact to the protesters. That's my concern about this weekend. I don't say that to discourage protests. I think everybody's got their First Amendment rights. You're asking me what to expect. I think there's a lot of anger out there. I think these are going to be robust protests. And we now know he's not in whatever mindset he's in. It's worse today than it was last week.
Hey, Chuck, we got to go, but I got to tell you, your Bannon interview on your first episode of your new show was fabulous.
Great. We didn't have time to get to it, but it was great, so people should look at it for themselves.
Oh, he's a piece of work.
He is indeed.
He's smart.
Thanks.
Chuck,
Smart.
Great to see you. Talk to you next week.
Bye,
Be
guys.
well. Thanks.
Chuck Todd is former moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. You got this brand new show called Sunday Night with Chuck Todd on Newsphere. That is NOOS, Newsphere platform. Chuck, thanks a lot. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to open the phone and text lines. As France tries to snuff out cigarette smoking in public places, America is having its own reckoning with nicotine, where long-standing taboos in TV and movies appear to have gone up, and vaping is on the rise, including among teens. That's next on BPR and GBH and NEPM, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News, 877-301-8970. We're opening the phone and text lines to ask about smoking and you.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Dean and Hamilton with Compass Real Estate in Cohasset, a sponsor of the South Shore Art Center's 70th Annual Arts Festival on the Common, June 13th through 15th. Learn more at deanandhamilton.com. And Benchmark Senior Living. Benchmark's Mind and Memory Care program is committed to instilling dignity and independence for residents by offering personalized care plans, working at every residence's pace. Locations and more at benchmarkseniorliving.com.
Under the Assad regime in Syria, press freedom was virtually non-existent. But now journalists there are imagining a different media landscape.
We must know what we will do with this freedom to help the people to know what is happening.
The future of journalism in Syria, that's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to BPR and GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browder. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Till the top of the hour, taking calls and texts at 877-301-8970 on your relationship with cigarettes and other nicotine products. Your vapes, those Zyn nicotine packs, things you stuff in between your gum and your cheek. It's a habit we can't seem to kick, even though a number of people have. The New York Times just published a piece about the reemergence of smoking in popular culture. Its omnipresence in TV shows like The Bear, pop music. Pop singer Lord's latest single includes a line about smoking, quote, the best cigarette of her life. And though cigarette sales remain down, sale of nicotine products, which include, as I said, vapes, those little pouches called Zins, appear to be filling the gap. So we want to hear from you, phone or text, 877-301-8097. If you're a smoker still, what's the thing keeping you from quitting? Are you waiting till Trump leaves Washington until you lose a lung? And if you have managed to quit, what worked for you? And if you quit, are you thinking of going back? What do you make about pushes to ban tobacco entirely? Brookline is now 5 years into their generational lifetime tobacco ban. It was the first in the nation, even though it's being emulated. And in France, they're in the midst of implementing a new ban on essentially all public area smoking.
Stunned.
So was I. Give us a call or text 877-301-8970. I should be clear. Well, vaping and these little packet things are filling some of the hole. The numbers are down, but it's much more acceptable, as I tried to say here, in popular culture than it was for a bunch of years. Good night and good luck, obviously. That was because it was a timepiece. You know, it was at the time that Edward R. Murrow was doing that show on CBS News, everybody was smoking. And so while the numbers are still down, the question is, should we deal the death blow to this, a poor choice of words, and go the way of Brookline, go the way of France, and just stamp it out all together? A lot of young kids are still vaping. Should we get rid of that too? 877-301-8970.
You know what's so interesting about the vaping thing? Everybody knows who began smoking as a teenager, and those of you who've just done it recently. Until vaping came along, you had to kind of go out of your way because you could smell the smoke everywhere. You had to go, out to the driveway or hide behind the shed, or you had to go someplace. You couldn't be smoking in the house. But one of these stories talks about how her 14-year-old son was vaping away up in his room, and she had no idea because it's much easier to disguise the smoke. And there's still a nicotine addiction problem. There's still likelihood of lung damage. So it is not the harmless thing that it was marketed to be. To begin with, I'm as anti-smoking as I could possibly be, and it's primarily, I'm not that concerned about the health of other people, but of the secondhand impact of this is intense and good for France. This notion you can't smoke with a lot of buildings in Boston. You can't, whatever it is, within 25 feet of this building or whatever it is. When you walk by somebody, even if you're outside, you don't feel like you're breathing in every single drop of whatever. You do with cigarettes. I don't think vaping is bad. No, I'm talking about cigarettes. Yeah, cigarettes exactly. Cigarettes are pretty bad. So let's just get rid of the damn things. But you know what's interesting about these kids? They talk about how they think that this is such a good thing for their dealing with their stress and their anxiety and their depression. We talk all the time about the mental health crisis post-COVID from young people, and they seem to think, some of them anyway, that vaping or eating what we used to call that Zin stuff, we used to call that, the baseball players all had it in their mouth, right? Chewing tobacco is going to help them. What were you saying? I've never smoked. Yes. You smoked. I did. You don't feel, and I mean this sincerely, as a result of the stress that you talk about every day from the era of Trump, are there not times you feel like smoking cigarettes again? No, I'm over it. Well, because it's been so long since I smoked. But when you're first starting to quit, all the things that you do, like have a cup of coffee, have a cigarette, have a glass of wine, and have a cigarette, going to a bar, they got rid of smoking in bars, which made it a lot easier. There's that other thing a lot of people do and then have a cigarette too. That's right. That's right. Especially in those movies. Yeah. Beyonce had a cigarette. In real life too, actually. And Beyonce had a cigarette on stage and threw it in the piano, and the piano exploded. So it's hard when you first stopped. It's not so hard if you've stopped. Here's Zoe, our coworker. I quit when I turned 30, bought a pack of Cowboy Killers, Marlboro Reds, when the rescission news came out. Just need to feel something. Sorry, Dad, she says, if he's listening. 877-301-8897. I guess the essence of this is, while numbers are dramatically down because of these little packets, these Zins, and because of vaping, the numbers are going up. Not to the level they used to be, but dangerous enough that outright bans like, again, Brookline and a bunch of cities in France are very attractive. What are you laughing about? We love a line from Airplane. The line that I picked a bad day to quit smoking. I picked a bad day. One of the texters just said, "Forget tobacco. I'm back. Just sniffing glue." I know. Lauren in Marblehead, you're first on BPR. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi. Good morning, guys.
Hi.
So, 2 quick points. One is I work at a major hospital in respiratory, and honestly, this makes me so sad when I see someone smoking I set patients up on home oxygen, send them home on home oxygen that, have COPD, typically as a result of smoking or of course, cancer. And I will never forget one particular patient that once I got to know quite well. She readmitted often, and she kind of sighed one day, and she said, Lauren, I'm just so beside myself. I just can't imagine what I was thinking when I thought these little white things that were just useless. I was so addicted to them that they were okay to destroy my life. And look at me now; I'm attached to an oxygen machine, my life has just kind of come. And that's common, right? Once you're on oxygen, your life is really difficult, right? The second point is vaping. I've seen a couple of young patients who just wiped their lungs out in a very severe way, and so people should just be aware of that as well. So it's more or less just like a plea to stop for anyone that's listening.
Lauren, you were the perfect first call for this discussion because I think Marjorie and I are totally with you. We just don't have the experience you do, and I'm glad you shared it with us and the listeners. Thanks so much for your call, Lauren.
Yeah, a lot of people are calling saying that vaping is a very, very, very dangerous thing. We're going to keep talking about this in just a little while. Smoking in you, the rise of vaping, the rise of what we used to call chewing tobacco. Where is it in your life? You're listening to Boston Public Radio on GBH and NEPM and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Going to be talking about this to the top of the hour. 877-301-8970.
Under the Assad regime in Syria, press freedom was virtually non-existent. But now journalists there are imagining a different media landscape.
We must know what we will do with this freedom to help the people to know what is happening.
The future of journalism in Syria, that's next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Revision Energy, a solar company and a Mitsubishi Electric heating and air conditioning contractor, offering customers the option to combine a solar array with a heat pump system to manage their heating and cooling at home. RevisionEnergy.com. And the Museum of Science, presenting the new exhibit, Perception Playground, which explores how your brain shapes your understanding of reality. Tickets at MOS.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, BPR, on GBH and NEPM. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're at the library tomorrow. Governor Healy joins us from 11 to noon to take your calls and ours on June 25th. Just tuning in, we're talking about smoking, and at least in culture, plays, movies, songs, it's reemergence. At the same time, if you think of a country and you think of smoking, what's the first country you think of? France. France is implementing this new comprehensive anti-tobacco plan, bans smoking in most public places, particularly where kids could be. That includes beaches, parks, good for them, near schools, sports venues. Their goal is to create a tobacco-free generation by 2032, which is what I like to do here.
Eliza, thank you for calling. She's in New York.
Monroe, hi.
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 Hello, good morning.
Good morning. What do you think?
I quit smoking maybe a year and a half ago, cold turkey, after smoking for years. And I avoided quitting because I didn't want to go through the excruciating withdrawal of cravings. And I didn't believe it would pass. And I just want to say, anybody who's out there thinking it does pass. But the secondary was, like you were talking about, what do? You have it with coffee, or you have it with wine, or you have your patterns. Mine was always going outside. I was always alone. It was a moment of like quiet and thinking, or deep breathing, obviously, to smoke. And there was sort of a pensiveness there.
Yes.
At times. And that part was hard to not having that those spaces was the unexpected hard thing to replace. And so I had to very consciously ask friends for, like, what am I going to do? You know, what do you people do?
What do you people do?
You know,
that's great.
You know, Eliza,
and I was alone. Nobody wanted to be with me. So go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say I could so relate to that because my father smoked. He died when I was in my 20s, and we used to sit sometimes in the summertime in the back porch, and he'd say, "Let's have a cigarette before we go in, Margie." So we'd have a cigarette together.
You and he?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
It was kind of a ritual thing in the summertime when I'd be visiting my parents, and I always remember that it was just you're there, you can hear the cicadas, you're looking out at the water. It's a beautiful summer night, having a cigarette with your father, and it was that pensive kind of thing. Very bad for both of us, obviously, but I know what you're talking about.
Yes, and it took work to create those spaces without a cigarette.
Exactly.
And to appreciate those times, but without smoking. It was tough.
Eliza, that was an excellent call. Call us again, please. Thank you.
Yeah, she
good
hit
to hear
on
from
something
you.
that's a big deal about smoking. Let's go have a cigarette.
Yeah.
Let's go out and have a cigarette. You know, especially when you're in a place when they get banned it in the workplace. Let's go out and have a cigarette. Let's go stand in the driveway and have a cigarette. There was that communal of you bad smokers out there huffing and puffing away.
You know what you and I have had big fights about on the air before, which I forgot about until this second, is what kind of warnings there should be on cigarette packs. In Canada, unless it's changed since last time we talked about this a year or so ago, they have these graphic images on the cigarette packs themselves of destroyed lungs or other organs, that sort of thing. On our packs, we have, I haven't even read a cigarette pack in ages. We have words. I mean, what does that do?
I think it almost doesn't matter in some ways because I think the big thing now is vaping. You know, that's what young people are doing. They're vaping. You're not going to have room for lungs on the side of a vape
20% of Americans are still smoking cigarettes, Marjorie.
Yeah.
I'm not saying vaping is not the new problem, but there's still a lot of cigarette smokers, far fewer. I think it's down from like 40-some% in the 1960s, to the high teens. I think those are the numbers now, which obviously is a spectacular advance. But don't you think when you see a couple of really sexy people in a movie
That's right.
and they're smoking a cigarette, don't you think, I'm serious about it, don't you think, or Lord singing about the best cigarette in her life, you don't think it's going to cause people to try it once again? I do.
I don't know. I don't know. I know that when you're over it, as the person said, Eliza, that just called, it takes a while to get over it, but once you're over it, I think most of us are over it. Although, listen to this one, maybe I'm wrong. This is from Woody, the UPS driver. I quit smoking 6 years ago. I miss it every day. I've often said that I'll start again when I turn 70, but if Trump keeps it up, I may start sooner. And then here's from Mike on the road. The vape brand Juul helped me quit a 25-year, 2-pack a day smoking habit. Jim, if you get vaping banned, I'm coming for you. That device is like an adult pacifier for me and keeps me sane. And
by the way, a lot of people think it does help wean you off cigarettes.
Yeah.
The problem is vaping in and of itself is dangerous, and I'm betting the texter knows that, but they may say that the devil you know, or whatever that expression is better.
Oh, Sue in Fairhaven says, I smoked a pack a day of Marlboro Lights for 10 years, quit 30 years ago. While regular cigarettes don't tempt me, the idea of a clove cigarette does sound good every once in a while. I don't know. Luckily for me, you can't buy them here, and I'm too lazy to order them online. Maybe you guys could check and see what a clove cigarette is. I've never heard of a clove cigarette.
I've had a chocolate cigarette. Have you had a chocolate cigarette?
No, I've not had a chocolate
What?
cigarette. No, I never had a chocolate cigarette.
Oh.
No.
Really? We unwrap it and so you eat the damn chocolate,
I used
no?
to smoke a ridiculous brand of cigarettes.
Which was what?
Tarryton 100s.
By the way, I know that people think I'm joking when I say this. I wasn't going to mention since you did. I've literally smoked one cigarette my whole life because I wanted to try it to see. I was working in the Catskills as a busboy, and I had a Tarryton. Because, you know why a Tarryton? Because they were the sexiest commercials on television. They were. It appeared that those were the men that got the best-looking women or some such thing.
What happened when it was the first time you tried a cigarette?
It was exactly, and it also tasted horrible.
Is trying to tell you something.
Well, it did because I never had another one.
Mark in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hi guys, I got to admit, I never smoked. Here's the hard part: I was an actor for a little while, and I played Tom in the Glass Menagerie.
Mm-hmm. Oh
Tom
wow!
Leans out on the stoop at night and smokes. And this was at Gloucester Stage, and there's always a nice theater and stuff. Everyone could tell that I didn't know how to smoke. I would sort of dip the cigarette into my mouth and then blow it out. And I had friends come up later who said, people who I knew distantly said, we could tell. It was a good performance. But
that's a good story.
Smoke. My experience of smoking, though, was, Jim, you'll appreciate this. This is in the 80s. I used to take the train from Lancaster down to Philly and then up to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And the layover, I would get into New York City and sit in that train station, and there were 2 hours. This is before cell phones. I had a book. Everybody else was smoking heavily. So my life, I could feel my life shortening as I sat in that train station, and everyone just smoking for 2 hours.
That's pretty good.
That's a good one,
hey,
Mark.
That was
Thank
a great
you for
call.
the story.
Great story. Thanks.
I'm a 23-year-old recent college grad. Vaping was very common at school. As someone who's never touched it, I find it disgusting. No one knows the impact. 10, 20, 30 years down the line, we know it's not going to be good. People don't think anything will happen because it's, quote, better than smoking, unquote. I can't stand that line because neither are better. They're both terrible.
We're old enough to remember. Do you remember Jamie, our lead producer, is on an airplane this morning and actually bumped into a big fan of the show who's a flight attendant, which was great. Do you remember, in our lifetimes, it wasn't even that long ago, I don't know, 20 years or something. Do you remember you could smoke in the back of a plane?
That's right.
And there was no, for those who were really young listening, there was no divider.
No.
You were just in the back of the plane. So this notion that
Smoke
for some
going
reason
everywhere.
that you were protecting the people in the front 2/3 of the plane was ridiculous. Our colleagues looked it up. Clove cigarettes, I had never heard of them either. A blend of tobacco and clove and other spices. They're spicy, and whoever wrote this note to us, kind of tasty, they said.
Well, that's one of the big things about flavored cigarettes. Cools, they're a flavored cigarette, and lots of people don't like Cools because they make you more likely to smoke because they taste better.
I should know this, but I think one of the things that was done by some states didn't outright ban vaping, but tried to limit it, is the flavors were what attracted young people. So I believe there are a number of jurisdictions, maybe even ours, and obviously I should know this. If you guys don't mind checking this out too, I think flavors, at least most flavors, were banned. We'll see. Ellen in Westport, what?
Oh, go ahead to
Ellen. Hi.
Hello. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, go ahead. Well, we got a problem.
I think we lost her.
Oh, she's gone. Yeah, Terry and Peabody, welcome to the show. Hi, Terry. How are you?
I am fine. And it's been 50 years since I had my last cigarette.
Wow.
And it's when somebody lights up next to me, it still smells good. And I was hearing you talk. Oh God, yes. And I was up to like 2 packs a day, and the only reason that I quit was I was in the hospital with a life-threatening surgery, damn near died, went home to a house which was 6 miles from the nearest store of any kind, and my husband wouldn't buy me cigarettes. And it took me probably 6 months for the sort of acute craving to leave me. And I'm sure if I hadn't had that health event, I would have been dead a long time ago from cancer. So don't fool around with cigarettes, kids. Don't fool around with nicotine.
Terry, thank you. That was a great
Thanks.
call. Good for your husband.
How'd you quit, by the way?
Well, it's interesting what Terry said. She was a 2-pack-a-day smoker. It's very interesting what
How
we've
much were
learned.
you smoking?
Never anything close to that.
Okay.
I used to smoke at the Herald because all the men smoked, and I thought it would make me one of the gang kind of thing. They smoked cigars, which are
so like in the newsroom, everybody is smoking.
I thought I couldn't write a story, if I wasn't smoking. But I think there's the heavy smokers and there's like the social smokers. They've talked about addiction with Ozempic. You know how Ozempic can deal not only with food cravings but with gambling cravings, smoking cravings, alcohol cravings. All these different cravings that people have. And I think there are 2 types of smokers, I think, or probably many, but 2 of them, they're social smokers. They go to the bar, they're smoking, they went out, and then there are the other people that get up in the morning and the first thing they do is have a cup of coffee and a cigarette. And that's what Terry was talking about, because you got to start early in the morning to get through 2 packs a day. That's 40 cigarettes in one day. Listen to this from Chris from Shrewsbury. I smoked for 11 years and tried to quit many times, but the only thing that worked was when I was a nurse's aide at the hospital with advanced COPD. She asked me over and over to let her go off the oxygen machine, and she knew that would make her die. But that night, she said, after that experience, I threw away my pack of cigarettes, didn't even think to finish it. That was in 2012. Never thought about having another one.
You know, by the way, a number of people are texting and saying, why do you keep calling this life thing in Brookline a lifetime ban? It's slightly complex. Let me just tell you how it works. It was the first in the nation, Brookline was, Marjorie's hometown, to pass this ban where you can't sell tobacco products to anyone born since the start of 2000. So obviously, as the population gets older, ultimately it's a total ban. And for those who say, well, they'll just go to the next town that hasn't enacted that kind of thing and buy it, that's how the ban in smoking in Massachusetts started. You know, it was one town at a time, and then ultimately it expanded. In terms of flavored, our colleagues looked it up. In 2020, we became the first state to ban the sale of all flavored tobacco products, including menthol and flavored e-cigarettes, fully implemented so-and-so and so-and-so. The sale of these products is now restricted to adult-only smoking bars for on-site consumption only. Terry and Peabody, welcome. Did we talk to Terry?
We already talked to Terry.
Oh, Terry, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Here's another one from Edward Island. When my mother-in-law was a nurse in the 1950s, the nurses were encouraged to smoke with patients to build rapport with them. Remember when the American Medical Association did ads in favor of smoking? I mean, that was like crazy. And remember how long it took them? They would have doctors smoking. Remember how long it took the AMA to come out against smoking? It was late. It was very, very late. There was, in the 70s maybe, or the 80s. I'm not sure.
Well, it was the Surgeon General's report would change everything. I don't.
Was that Coop?
Was it? Is that what changed the whole deal?
I don't know.
Let's go to Ed in Dorchester. Hi, Ed.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to share with you an experience of my father, who was a captain in the Cambridge Fire Department for many years, and at one point he was given the assignment of testing a smoke mask protector, and this device had charcoal to screen smoke through, and cotton and water. I forget what else. The only smoke that got through was cigarette smoke.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So, anyone thinking that any tobacco product is safe is delusional. So that's all I wanted to say.
You said it well. Ed,
that
thanks
was
for
a
the
good
call.
one.
Can we play an ad, by the way? This is fairly famous, but if you weren't alive at the time, it's worth listening to. This is a 1968 Virginia Slims. You've come a long way, baby ad.
Oh, God, I remember these.
Or have we? Here's the commercial.
You got your own cigarette now, baby. You've come a long, long way.
Introducing new Virginia Slims, the slim cigarette for women only.
How great is this?
Tailored for the feminine hand. Slimmer than the fat cigarettes men smoke, with flavor women like. Rich, mild Virginia flavor. New extra long Virginia Slims in the slim purse pack.
Is that great?
Yeah. I mean,
that's almost a spoof of an ad rather than the ad itself. That's pretty
and I remember
great.
some of the shows I watched when I was a kid, like Perry Mason. Did you ever watch Perry Mason?
Are you kidding?
It was
A
like
lawyer?
a smoke fest. Everybody was smoking. Paul Drake was smoking. His secretary was smoking. It was like they let go of one, they light one cigarette for the next one. It was like a cloud of smoke surrounding
Well, they smoke.
them.
I said this before. They smoke in the Bear, don't they?
Yeah, they smoke.
They
in
do,
the,
yeah.
Yeah, they smoke in the Bear. They smoke in a lot of things. They're talking about this new movie that's coming out, Materialists, Paying Lucy. I don't know. There's all these shows that are coming out. The Bear,
Well, we
they
talked
got
before.
one. And Just Like That, Friendship, all these new movies. I mentioned Beyonce before.
How weird was it? Even though the Edward R. Murrow
Housewives.
thing, the George Clooney piece that played live from Broadway on CNN on Saturday night, Good Night and Good Luck, everybody is smoking in the CBS newsroom. And even though you knew it was a timepiece from whatever that was, the 50s, I guess is what it was. Yeah, it's like, wasn't it
after the
weird
war.
when when a producer would walk over to somebody, light their cigarette,
Yeah.
another person would walk over, but everybody was smoking.
And you see the footage of the World War II soldiers. They're all smoking in World War II. Listen to this one. I work with an anti-vaxxer who gives me crap about getting the COVID vaccine as he's walking out to smoke his 50th cigarette of the day. I love that one. And a lot of people talk about how the first time they ever smoke a cigarette makes them really sick, and you wonder why you keep going back after your body tries to warn you the first time. Oh my God, listen to this. This is from Carl in New Hampshire. A friend of mine had surgery for throat cancer. Watching him smoke through his voice box was the only thing I needed to never smoke. Wow.
Let's go to Ron in Seabrook. Hi, Ron. Welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to talk to you.
You too.
I'm just thinking if we went back in a time machine to the days when everybody was smoking, the smell of every place you went would probably knock us over.
And your clothes and everything.
Yeah.
And by the way, if you still, there's some hotels that allow smoking, and there's some allegedly great penalty if you smoke. If you by chance get a hotel room where the prior has smoked, you can't even hang out in it. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, it's disgusting. Well, I haven't had time to look it up. I apologize, but does anyone have an idea of what the federal subsidies are to the tobacco farmer?
I think there still are. I don't know what the level is. I think they
remember?
still exist, I believe.
Yeah, they probably do.
Yeah,
they probably do. That's weird.
Talk about push and pull. I mean, municipalities are banning it, and taxpayer dollars are helping to produce it. I mean, it's such a stupid arrangement.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Listen to this one. Thank you for the call. Listen to this one. I would think, talking about smell, as he just did, I would think the one slogan that would get people to stop is, kissing a smoker is like licking an ashtray, which is a great point. If one half of the couple smokes, it's really brutal. But then we have Nina from Putnam, Connecticut, who says, I quit smoking 30 years ago, was a pack-a-day smoker. I want to smoke every single day, and I will start again when I turn 80. And then somebody else mentioned...
And when the other guy said he's 70, at that point they mean because I'm going to die.
Yeah,
what the
they'll be dead soon. They'll be dead
in the
soon.
words of Senator Ernst.
And somebody else just reminded me, Jonathan from Cambridge, they used to sell candy cigarettes. When you used to go to the penny candy store as a kid...
I just said, have you ever had a chocolate cigarette? And you looked at me like I was...
I don't remember chocolate ones.
Well,
I remember
it's candy cigarette.
Yeah,
Chocolate is a candy thing.
Okay.
You're so obsessed on lint balls. You can't even think beyond the lint ball.
Lint balls.
Marjorie and I have
There's a lint ball store.
Marjorie and I
right
both
across the street.
employ a wonderful person who shall remain unnamed.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ask her if we can ever mention on the air, who does work, and she's doing work in my house and doing work in Marjorie's house. And I said, she just met Marjorie the other day. How was it? And she said, it's great. She's wonderful. I was so glad to meet her. And I said, so what do you do? And she tells me what the work was. And she says, and all she did was ply me with lint balls the whole time.
Okay, let me just tell you something. You can get lint balls at like CVS and Staples, but you don't want to do that. You want to go to the lint ball store right across
the library.
You can pick out which flavors you like, and they're a million times fresher.
You have no idea.
I have hundreds of lint balls in my house. I have probably eaten thousands of lint balls in my life, and I know all about them, Jim.
Did you when you stopped, in a moment of seriousness again here, when you stopped smoking, did you substitute something for it? Because a lot of people say when they stop smoking, they gain weight, for example.
Well, when I smoked, I used to run marathons.
Oh, yeah.
Matter of fact, my best friend at the time was a really good runner. She qualified for the Boston Marathon when it used to be under 3:15 for a woman, and smoked a pack a day. They interviewed her for the Providence Journal. She was such a big deal because women were so rare then.
Yeah.
I said, you're going to tell me smoke a pack a day. She wouldn't do it.
I want to tell a really quick story, and I had totally forgotten about it. One of my favorite video scenes ever. This is the Olympics, 24 years ago. I'm watching Olympic basketball, and I think it was the Lithuanian team or some team. They're smoking on the bench when they're not in the game.
First marathon I ever ran. The end of it, I went over and had a cigarette.
Is that really true?
Yeah, I did.
That's pathetic.
It was very bad.
Okay, check out the Brookline law and check out what they're implementing in France. They're really they're ahead of the game there. I think doing good things.
We have a lot of people saying good things about clove cigarettes, but we shouldn't say that because they're all bad.
And they have it's partially tobacco, from what I understand.
Okay,
that's it.
Thank you very much for all your calls and texts. The show continues here in Boston for you listening on NEPM. We are done, but tune into the fabulous 413 starting at NEPM at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So we are up next with Andrea Cabral. We're going to talk with her. She's the former Suffolk County Sheriff about today's hearing on the legality of troops in Los Angeles. We're also going to talk to her about Harvey Weinstein verdict. You remember him. He was the one that was sexually assaulting all those actors in Hollywood. I'm Marjorie Egan. He's Jim Browdy. You're listening to Boston Public Radio and GBH and NEPM. And thanks for all the listeners who joined us for our first hour on NEPM. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Andrea Cabral, former sheriff of Suffolk County, is up right after the noon news. Boston Public Radio continues.
It's not over yet. More smart conversation about community issues up ahead with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan on Boston Public Radio, right after a news update from NPR. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit ComcastBusiness.com. When a young, disillusioned doctor leaves the UK, she moves to South India and finds work at an understaffed and overworked hospital. Watch Good Karma Hospital, tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on Hour 2 of BPR. Former Public Safety Secretary Andrea Cabral joins for another edition of Law & Order. Guilty of sex crimes. That's Harvey Weinstein. We'll discuss that. Plus, a lawsuit finally alleging Musk of illegal action in Wisconsin. Remember when he offered cash prizes to voters during a high-stakes state Supreme Court election? Didn't work, but that doesn't mean it wasn't illegal.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll talk about the disparities in Boston's healthcare system with Michael Curry, the head of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, a healthcare desert in Mattapan, and a new proposal from State Senator Nick Collins to use the shuttered Carney Hospital there as a training center for nurses. All that is next on the second hour of BPR 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. One person's been found alive after today's plane crash in western India. A local police commissioner confirmed in a statement to NPR today that authorities found a survivor who's being treated at a local hospital. The London-bound flight was carrying more than 200 people. NPR's Dia Hadid has the latest.
Footage shared by the outlet Press Trust of India showed the plane sinking over a residential quarter of the western Indian city of Ahmedabad, and then the sound of a blast and a ball of fire. The Press Trust then shared images of medics rushing casualties on stretchers. The chairman of the group that operates Air India said in a statement that its flight, which was bound for London's Gatwick Airport, was involved in a tragic incident. The Associated Press reports that it's the first crash of this kind of aircraft, a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Reuters said the aircraft gave a Mayday call, signalling an emergency before it crashed. The last accident involving Air India was in 2020, when more than 20 people were killed. Dia Hadid, NPR News, Mumbai.
President Trump signing 3 congressional resolutions targeting California's effort to accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles.
I was going to sign a executive order and give it a shot. But the one good thing with this, number one, it holds up forever. And number two, unless somebody votes it out, they'll never do that. And it's just so much better, huh? It's so much better. That's so great. Very proud of you.
At the White House today, Trump also told reporters he will not fire Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He has often criticized Powell for not lowering interest rates, stoking concerns about the president's attempt to influence the central bank's response to U.S. economic conditions, including those linked to President Trump's tariffs. Telecommunications in Gaza down for a third day. No internet, no phone service. The blackout has a direct impact on emergency medical and humanitarian response to people across the war-torn Palestinian territory. The House of Representatives is expected to vote today on a package of more than $9 billion of spending cuts. NPR's Deirdre Walsh reports The bill would claw back more than $1 billion in federal funding for public broadcasting.
The rescissions bill is the first request by the Trump administration to codify some of the spending cuts proposed by the Department of Government Efficiency created by Elon Musk. South Carolina Republican Ralph Norman says the more than $8 billion in foreign aid cuts in the bill include wasteful programs. He also says Congress needs to stop funding public broadcasting outlets he argues are biased.
Because taxpayers should not be forced to subsidize a left-wing media operation like NPR and PBS.
Democrats say the cuts will especially hurt rural areas without access to news and emergency alert services.
That's NPR's Deirdre Walsh. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. We are watching that vote very closely today. The area of Cape Cod that is called Lower Cape Cod holds its first ever Pride Festival this weekend. Now, where's Lower Cape? Well, it's the elbow part of the Cape, consisting of Harwich, Brewster, Orleans, and Chatham, and you can squeeze Eastham in there as well. It's one of a handful of Pride events happening on Cape Cod this weekend, with some events starting today, June 12th. Organizers say the Lower Cape Pride Weekend is about connection, it's about joy and visibility, and features free events for all ages, including performances, social gatherings, education, and community art. One of the key events of Lower Cape Pride Weekend is its people-powered parade, which will take place from 10 a.m. to noon on Saturday in Orleans. In GBH Business News, Live Nation Entertainment investing $1 billion to build 18 new and revitalized live music venues in small towns across the country. An announcement made yesterday, Live Nation officials said that over the next 18 months, Live Nation plans to open doors or break ground on venues ranging from intimate clubs to large outdoor amphitheaters. The company's portfolio of 150 venues across the U.S. represents roughly 4% of all music venues nationwide. Around here, Live Nation has the House of Blues, the Leader Bank Pavilion, the MGM Music Hall Fenway, the Xfinity Center, and Bank & Pavilion. And while no new venues are scheduled for this company CEO Michael Rapino says their mission is simple: to help artists deliver more unforgettable experiences. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We will return to the Boston Public Library tomorrow. We'll be there as well on Tuesday when we'll be speaking, and I'm so excited about this, with Ken Burns, the great documentarian.
He's zooming in, by the way, we should say to people.
He is zooming in, that's right. But we're still going to speak to him, and I'm very excited about that. And we're going to be joined by the mayor from 1 to 2 on Tuesday, I think, as well.
I think so.
Hello, Jim.
Yes, Tuesday. Hi to you. Now via Zoom, we're joined by Suffolk County Sheriff, former Suffolk County Sheriff, former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us weekly, of course. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, how are you?
We're good.
We're very, very good. So, Andrea Cabral, we've been watching all week the protests and violence unfolding in California, the fight about the Marines being there. Gavin Newsom, the governor, and the mayor of L.A. don't want them there, and they're there anyway. And there's a hearing today on the decision by President Trump to send both the Guard and the Marines to help with immigration. What's your take?
Well, I'm glad that Judge Breyer, he's actually the brother of Justice Breyer.
Isn't that wild?
SCOTUS Justice, yes. He's his brother. I'm very glad that he scheduled a full hearing on this. Originally, Gavin Newsom had asked for sort of an immediate injunction against Trump's marshaling under federal law the might of the National Guard to sort of set them against their own people. And it is, I don't take issue with, Newsom asking for an injunction because the harm is apparent. But the fact that Breyer has scheduled a hearing for today, I'm not sure what time today it's happening, but it's scheduled for today, means that the Justice Department is going to have to defend this decision. And they're going to have to defend it in open court, and they're going to have to defend it on the record, and they're going to have to answer questions that the judge poses to them as to why what the basis is for the president believing that there is a crisis and that there's, anarchy in the streets that causes him to have to marshal the National Guard in this case. Why California, which is a country that has like the seventh, largest economy, I think, in the world, it could be its own country. Why California doesn't have the ability to handle this on its own.
Okay, so two things I'd like to say here. One, which has nothing to do with the topic. Judge Breyer, as you say, the brother of Stephen Breyer from Cambridge, I should say, former Supreme Court Justice, is 3 years old. There should be no judges 83 years old deciding cases. That's my first point. Second point, as you said, the Justice Department has to defend its position. Let me tell you, we're going to play some sound from Pam Bondi yesterday, the Attorney General. She was asked a question by reporters about the double standard with L.A. protesters compared to the January 6 rioters that Trump pardoned. I will say in advance, if I gave this answer to the question, I would lock myself in my house and not come out for a month. Listen to the Attorney General of the United States trying to describe why January 6th deserved pardons and L.A. protesters deserve the military. Here she is.
Well, this is very different. These are people out there hurting people in California right now. This is ongoing, no longer. We're going to protect them. We're going to do everything we can to prosecute violent criminals in California. California is burning. These people are waving Mexican flags, yet they don't want anyone to go back to Mexico. They're burning American flags. This is the United States of America, and we're going to protect Americans. We're going to protect all citizens out there. Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Is that in the top 10 most embarrassing responses to any question by any human being, Attorney General or otherwise? This is ongoing, no longer, wouldn't be prudent. I mean, unbelievable.
No, you're absolutely right. But when you don't have any shame and when your intention is to sort of be proud of the fact that you're giving answers like this because you figure it's going to walk. Who's going to do anything about this? Is their attitude is there's nothing you can do. No, it's an absolutely shameful answer. I mean, the three words that some reporters should have come back with were hang Mike Pence.
Yeah.
How about that?
Well, explain for the three people who slept through January 6th. Explain what you mean by hang Mike Pence, Andrea Cabral.
The notion of this country, that we've always had protests in this country that people have taken to the streets for one reason or another. And it has very rarely, outside of Kent State, and you saw how well that went for the National Guard back when Nixon was president, states take care of this on their own. They don't need the federal government to do it. So the insurrection at the Capitol, was incited by the very president who subsequently pardoned everyone who was involved in it, which is essentially the same as having an arsonist who literally sets the fire, pardon everybody who stood behind him and threw kindling on it to make it worse. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's exactly what has happened there. So he's already pardoned them. But for her to say that people who literally stormed barricades, then broke windows, stormed the inside of the Capitol where legislators, congresspeople had to hide and cower and run, as did the vice president, to escape these people, some of whom were chanting Mike Pence, some of whom were armed, some of whom erected a gallows, and others who defecated and urinated inside the Capitol, that's not worthy of protection. That's worthy of being absolved. While people who are protesting, people being disappeared off the street and getting no answers from their government as to how and why this is happening. And some of these people are citizens, and even if they're undocumented, are here legally. And even if they're not here legally or without a visa or anything like that, don't deserve to be snatched off the street with no questions answered. That is deserving of military might. And that's exactly where we are in this country.
Zoe, if you can lift my spirits for a second and just play maybe the first 10 seconds of Pam Bondi one more time, it'll make my day.
This is very different. These are people out there hurting people in California right now. This is ongoing, no longer.
No longer.
We're going to protect
That's
them.
enough. I'm good. Thank you very much. That's the Attorney General of the United States. And you're right. There's almost a pride in not being able to answer. I mean, I know that sounds so perverse, but you articulated it so well. There's sort of like, I can answer that question with total obfuscation, no clarity, no content, and I'm feeling pretty good about myself for doing it that way.
They just keep talking. They just keep talking. They keep and hope enough people won't get it. I think that's what goes on.
But there is a method to the madness. I mean, understand that it is exactly what Steve Bannon said quite a while ago, as a matter of fact, during the first term, which is flood the zone.
Yeah.
Flood the zone. He used a different word for feces, but he said flood the zone with feces because they're not going to be able to keep up, and you're going to get away with so much while they're not able to keep up. They'll move on. The Beham Mondi thing, people will move on from because tomorrow they're going to do a bunch of other things. And tomorrow's Friday, and they reserve Friday for particularly bad news dumps. So she's right. I mean, that's why there's a pride. It's the exact premise of the movie Idiocracy, which is also kind of
Idiocracy. Oh, I don't even know about that movie. Is that about the Trump presidency or something else?
It used to be a parody, or it used to be sort of a satire of what would happen if idiots ran the United States of America and ran it proudly. Wow. And it has actually turned out to be far less of a satire and more of a reality movie. Basically.
By the way, being there with Peter Sellers, which is one of the greatest movies ever, is pretty close for those who haven't seen that too. So Harvey Weinstein, this is breaking news in the last few minutes. Yesterday, one guilty verdict in the retrial in New York, one not guilty verdict, and earlier today, a mistrial on a rape charge. Now, the one conviction was on, I guess, what's described as a sex crime. I mean, I think that's the term of art that carries up to 20 years in prison. Could you describe why the original conviction was overturned in New York State? There's a conviction still in place in California. Why it was overturned and what the prosecution did differently, if anything, to avoid an overturning again this time?
Sure. In the first trial, the prosecutors there did what prosecutors all across the country do every single day.
Including you.
Yes, I certainly have. Used what I call prior bad acts to establish a pattern of conduct. And with Harvey Weinstein, even if you just read articles about him or read books where his behavior has been described, his particular type of alleged sexual assaults followed a very clear pattern of him sort of ingratiating himself with either young actresses, models, people sometimes new to the business, sometimes not so new to the business, but people who needed something or wanted something from him. It often would take place in a hotel room. He would find some pretext, even if they were meeting him elsewhere, for a drink or for lunch, to get them back to the hotel room, and then he would force himself on them in the hotel room. And the prosecutors in the first trial used uncharged acts, had alleged victims on those uncharged acts to show that he followed a pattern in the acts that were the basis of the crimes for which he was charged in the first trial. I still am kind of surprised and shocked by this, but the appeals court overturned his conviction and said that it was too prejudicial. I specifically recall that of the voluminous number of prior bad acts that were available to be used, the prosecution had narrowed it down to a relative few. The appeals court apparently thought that it was too many, or the details were too far afield. I'm still not exactly sure why they had an issue with it, but in any event, they overturned his conviction. So this is the second trial, and in this trial, they didn't use any prior bad act witnesses. They had two of the charges, two of the crimes from the first trial, and they added a third count, and that's the count on which a mistrial was just declared. A third count from an alleged victim who had not participated in the first trial.
By the way, I should know this, but I'm hoping that this is because I just Googled and I got pictures of Harvey Weinstein hanging out with Trump. This is a state court, right? So that he can't Trump could not pardon him. Am I right? These are state convictions.
Yeah, this is not a federal case.
Okay.
And it appears that the jury deliberations, to call them fraught is probably an understatement. It's very rare that you hear that not one, but two jurors, one of whom is the jury foreperson, asked to speak to the judge in private, and there were sort of back and forth allegations of jurors treating one juror unfairly, allegedly, and then
screaming at each other.
Screaming. They could be heard screaming at each other. The jury foreperson asked to speak to the judge privately, even though their private conversations, they're still on the record, a transcript is still generated, said that a juror threatened him over whatever his decision was. It's not clear whether he voted to acquit or convict on a rape charge, and threatened to see him, quote unquote, outside, said, "We'll see you outside." So, there's no doubt that Harvey Weinstein and his attorneys will appeal this on the basis that he was not given a fair trial because the jury was, at odds with each other. I don't know if that'll be enough, but it certainly is going to form at least one of the bases for the appeal.
In the New York Times story about this trial, they talked about how the jury convicted Weinstein in the second New York sex crimes and some of the stuff, as we just mentioned. But they talked about how the MeToo movement had waned. And it's true. It's not in the news anymore. Women, all around the country had thousands and thousands of stories. But I like to think, and maybe I'm being naive, and you've often told me I'm naive, Andrea, so maybe there's going to be another time when I'm going to be naive. But I did
say you're naive, Marjorie. I say I love your optimism.
Okay, my optimism. But I sort of thought that the Me Too movement was effective in changing people's perspective on sexual harassment. They understood that this, and this is obviously a rape case, but that women have difficulty coming forward about this. It may take them years to come forward. Blah 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 blah. That there was some understanding that we didn't have prior to the Me Too movement. But maybe I'm wrong. That they seem to think it hasn't changed very much.
No, I don't necessarily think that you're wrong. Remember that Harvey Weinstein got a 16-year sentence on a previous sexual assault conviction. He's appealing it, but that's time that he's been convicted on that, and he got 16 years for that. I'm not sure whether I still can't tell. I assume he's in custody for that while this case is going on.
Yeah.
While the second retrial has been happening. But I don't necessarily think that you're wrong. I think that there is still a heightened awareness. The bottom line is that somebody like Harvey Weinstein was brought down based on all of his past conduct. And there certainly was a time when people thought that no, he would never, ever be held accountable. I think part of what makes people think that it has waned is that we essentially elected a credibly accused sexual predator
to the White
president
House
a second time.
Yeah.
And this is after some 39 women had or 19, between 19, I guess, and maybe 30 women had accused him. And even after he was very credibly accused by Jean.
Wasn't accused, he was found liable in a civil proceeding for sexual abuse.
And I think that has an effect on it. The idea of people's faith in the justice system is obviously shaken by that. But I would never go as far as to say that the Me Too movement has been rendered toothless.
Good.
At some point,
that makes me happy, Andrea.
Well, it becomes what it shouldn't be the Me Too movement. It should just be the way we view these cases.
Two things.
The reason I mention that, you hear this all the time. Why do they wait so long to come forward? Why do they wait so long to come forward? And that makes me feel as though people haven't learned enough about that.
Yeah.
It sometimes takes decades.
Well, Zoe just posted for us, for a short period of time, Pete Hegseth's mother remembered when she said, in the immortal words of whatever her name is, Mrs. Hegseth, this is what she wrote to her son. Remember this before she retracted it? I have no respect for any man that belittles, lies, cheats, sleeps around, and uses women for his own power and ego. This is the best line ever. You are that man and have been for years. And as your mother, it pains me and embarrasses me to say, but it is the sad, sad truth. By the way, can I just say, I don't think we had them on radio. I had Jodi Cantor and Megan Twohey from the New York Times on TV with me. If you want to read one thing about this round 2 of the MeToo movement, because it didn't just start a few years ago. It was called She Said, Breaking the Sexual Harassment Story.
Oh, it's a great movie.
Help, and I didn't see the movie, Ignite a Movement, but it is brilliant. It's Weinstein-esque,
and
about Weinstein.
It shows how he hired people to scare the reporters that did this, not just those 2 women from the New York Times, but also Ronan Farrow, who wrote about Harvey Weinstein, too. At one point, Ronan Farrow was thinking about getting a gun. He may have even gotten a gun because he was so scared of what would happen to him.
You know, Andrea, before we leave this for a second, I meant to ask you this last time we talked about him or Diddy or whoever it is. As someone who was a sheriff and a prosecutor for a long time, it's now pretty clear that Weinstein's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. I mean, the thought was that if he was acquitted in the second trial here, there were some of the same issues in California. Maybe that'd be overturned. But now with both convictions, what is life like for a still very wealthy, formerly, master of the universe, to say the least, kind of person? Now that he's been convicted and his cellmates and the guards know he's never getting out, what's life like for the rest of Harvey Weinstein's life? I know everybody's different, but as a general rule.
I assume that it is, it's no picnic. But he can pay in many ways to be protected. And, in a prison situation, sure, there are going to be people that are sort of out to get him or, resent his wealth and his fame and, might be looking to beat him up or make life hard for him, certainly. But he's got enough money where he could pay others to protect him. And I assume that that's exactly what he would try to do. And he would try to get by on charm. And there's also going to be plenty of guys there that want to hear stories from him about all of these famous actresses, beautiful women.
What do you mean, Andrea?
That he knew, and so he's going to have his admirers. It's not good. Like I said, it's still not a life that any of us, I think, would like to lead. Nobody wants to be incarcerated, but his wealth and his fame will ensure that he will be as comfortable as money will buy.
But I don't understand what that means. He's going to pay prison guards to be nicer to him, or he's
fellow
going to bring
inmates.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
fellow inmates.
He can put money in anybody's canteen that he wants.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, and I wouldn't. I don't think that it's impossible that he wouldn't pay prison guards as well in some way, shape, or form.
Okay.
His whole life has been about paying people off once he gets caught in order to not suffer the consequences. If anybody thinks he intends to spend the rest of his life in jail making those consequences as minimal as possible, they haven't been paying attention.
Despite this, I want to end this by saying this is really important, this case.
It is important.
It's really important in the fact that he is pretty clearly going to be held accountable for the rest of his life, which is not a hell of a lot of solace to the women he abused, but it's a good and important
And as
thing.
we know, because he was a rich and powerful guy, and women waited years and years, it was a big secret that was not so much
Well, he was a
secret.
career breaker, too.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously.
exactly.
Hey, Andrea, it's great to see you as always. Thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate it. Bye.
Okay, we have been speaking with former Suffolk County Sheriff and former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral, who joins us weekly. Coming up after this quick break, we are going to talk with Michael Curry of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers on RFK Jr.'s effort to give children placebos instead of measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines. You're listening to BPR on 89.7, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Trusted, local, News.
Boston city officials are offering their annual summer safety guidance.
GBH News.
Officials are warning drivers to expect significant, potentially hours-long delays.
Here for what matters to you.
Governor Maura Healey says health care cuts approved by the U.S. House would have a devastating impact on the Commonwealth if they pass the Senate and are signed into law.
GBH 89.7. Online at gbhnews.org.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and MIT Federal Credit Union. With a full range of financial services, their financial advisors are committed to helping members' money work for them. Membership's open to the public. More at mitfcu.org. Federally insured by NCUA. And Native Plant Trust, a source for pollinator-friendly plants. Available at Garden in the Woods in Framingham. More at nativeplanttrust.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, streaming at youtube.com/DBH News. We're at the library tomorrow. Ask the Mayor is next Tuesday. Ask the Governor, June 25th, both at the library. We're joined now on Zoom by Michael Curry. He's the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, on the board of the National NAACP. He also is co-chair of a city-led body that looked into the impacts of the closure of Dorchester's Carney Hospital, thanks to Stewart Healthcare. Michael, good to see you.
Good to see you both.
Hey, Michael. So RFK Jr., let's start with him. We're going to play a little sound from him in a second. He's fired the vaccine experts at the Center for Disease Control, and a lot of people who are anti-vaxxers are very happy about it. Here he is at the White House yesterday talking about the changes to the Vaccine Advisory Committee.
A compliant child must take between 69 and 92 vaccines to stay in school in some states. And not one of them has been safety tested in a pre-licensing placebo-controlled trial. And that is just malpractice. So the people who were in charge of that are now gone. And we're going to bring people onto the ACIP panel, not anti-vaxxers. We're bringing people on who are credentialed scientists, who are highly credentialed physicians.
What do you think?
Well, I want to start probably where both of us, all three of us have talked about before, is that, we have the understanding that when you have conversations about anything in science or in medicine or in healthcare, housing, education, that there should be experts at the table, that people talking about it, setting policy, hiring, staffing, organizations should be people with backgrounds and expertise in those areas. And the whole anti-DEI effort, which purportedly is to say that we don't need unqualified people flying helicopters and planes into each other and are black and brown. So I want to start there to say we have a person who clearly is in a role that doesn't know science and doesn't really understand vaccines. Now removing an entity that I didn't know much about, Marjorie, before I was appointed by the governor to the vaccine working group, Governor Baker, to decide who got a vaccine and when. And all of a sudden I was introduced to the advisory committee on immunization practices. That's where we took our guidance from when we got in our meetings here in Massachusetts to say, okay, where should we put, what are we seeing in COVID-19? What are the distances that people need to have to avoid catching or contracting the disease? How is it spreading? Where is it spreading? What's the advisory around immunization for the disease? They are a trusted body that are appointed because of their expertise to advise the nation on how to respond to these diseases as they happen. Now what you have is more political appointments. You have people who are almost, I'll call it self-fulfilling prophecy. I don't believe vaccines save lives, therefore I'm going to appoint people who believe that too to get the result that I want. So at least 3 to 4 of them are anti-vaxxers. And when you see some of what's happening here and across the globe with spread of infectious diseases, that terrifies me.
Well, also what terrifies me is the Republicans who are so sycophantic and weak and concerned about nothing except a constituency of one, were lied to during the confirmation process and in the meetings Kennedy had individually with him about his position on vaccines, and they don't give a damn. We were talking yesterday, and I don't think the new people have been picked yet. We knew the old people had been fired. When Dr. Catherine Gergen Barnett from Boston Medical Center was with us, and we talked about how much harder it makes her job, I assume this makes the job of all of the healthcare providers in all of your community health centers that much more difficult, because they don't have just have explained fact. They have to rebut dangerous fiction, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this is in many other spaces coming out of this administration where, we got to seek alternative sources for the truth, for the science, versus relying on government entities to provide us with that science, with that truth. So even in this case, when you talk about ACIP, as we refer to it, there's a conversation about whether you create an alternative to ACIP, whether there's a place that we go for the truth about vaccination. So it is the disturbing moment of our time that we can't rely on entities to provide us unpoliticized truths about disease. We know that science matters. So I think for me, to your question, Jim, we're going to all have to figure out in the healthcare space, where do we go for our information so that we can provide the best care and the best guidance to our patients. The problem that I have, and you didn't even trip into this with your question, but I'll go there, which is where they start influencing our decisions based on their guidance out of this federal government. That also terrifies me.
Well, what is this going to mean, though? Does this mean that if he gets his way, he's talking about wanting these placebo-controlled trials. So does this mean if you bring your baby in to get the MMR, measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, which you get fairly early, I think you're just a few months old, I forget exactly, but you could, instead of getting the vaccine, you could be in a trial where you wouldn't get the vaccine, or a pregnant woman could wind up getting a placebo. And we know from COVID that pregnant women are highly advised for themselves and also for the future health of the baby that will be born with some antibodies because of mom's vaccine. Does this mean that we're going to be in a trial? And also, does it mean that we may not have insurance cover these vaccines if you're a person with not a lot of money?
Yeah, I mean, all of it concerns me. I think ultimately we know that anytime I walk in and I participate in a clinical trial, particularly if I'm a parent and I'm looking at potential diseases my child could experience over the course of their childhood or adulthood, I'm coming in to make sure I'm protecting my child. I'm not coming in to be put through an experiment without a clear understanding that what you're giving me is not helping my child. Yeah. And I'm leaving my child susceptible to a disease that could take his or her life. I mean, ultimately, I'm still concerned because I want scientists to guide me and us on what to do in research. And I want scientists, legitimate researchers and epidemiologists and others to be guiding us on disease. That is not what we have as we move into this new space.
But does he have the power to do these things is what I'm asking. I mean, could
well, I think I don't know that, Marjorie, but I think what we've seen is an overreach of power.
Yeah.
So, just like from the top down, there's an overreach. So that's what worries me about new guidance out of this newly constituted ACIP, is how much influence and power that this particular position that RFK Jr. holds wields over the provision of medical care across this country.
At minimum, we'd all agree he has the bully pulpit. And let me give you an example from my former life during ballot questions. When anybody was unsure, they would always vote no. That's what all the polls show. And I think the same thing applies here. If you hear conflicting information, vaccines are okay, vaccines are good, vaccines are dangerous, they're not safe and effective. I think the default for a lot of young people who don't have the time to do their own research is they just won't do it. We're just going to put a lot of people in danger. Can we move on from...
I just have one more question about this because...
And one quick comment on that. We had Governor Healy at the Health Equity Summit, Trend Summit yesterday. She just gave a phenomenal opening speech for the day. But she said, we're not taking our foot off the gas. We know vaccines. We know public health. And we're going to go and do what we need to do in Massachusetts. So to your point, Jim, I think we have to counter all of that misinformation coming out of Washington with the correct information so that we if you are a young person or a parent who's hesitant to get a vaccine for your child, we have to dominate the space with the truth so that that parent can make that decision without any trepidation, any hesitation.
So, Michael, we're going from anti-vax campaigns to anti-anyone who's not a straight white guy campaigns. You had a couple of things about NIH. There's a little piece in Stat, the wonderful adjunct to the Globe.
Yeah, it is great.
Just really, that NIH, National Institutes of Health, for about a minute and a half dropped from their website this prohibition on any DEI-related thing, and then they reinstituted. And I had a question for you, but before I get to mine, you mentioned Healy and this health equity speech. You are sort of the ultimate champion of health equity issues. We've been talking about this for years on the radio. How does this NIH ban not have a dramatically negative impact on the work you're doing?
It does. I mean, it is. DEI has been weaponized like defund the police was weaponized, right? We now have a war of language. And if you can dominate the space with a false misrepresentation of being woke, defunding police, DEI, then you win. And I'll honestly tell you, Jim, they're winning because the average American doesn't unpack the words. They don't have history. They don't have context. So when these things are being misrepresented, and in this case, DEI includes health equity. Look at the bad words, the list of words they gave us: health equity, marginalized. As I've said, women, Marjorie's on the list. So if you are a researcher like Dr. Geronimus, who wrote the book Weathering, and I moderated a panel with her, when she says they told me that if you're doing health equity research looking at Black maternal health and the disparate impact it has on Black women, you have to attest that you won't use the federal money to do this research. Now, she could easily check that box, not easily, because of course that means a reduction in her funding. But she said, but then it also asks you to attest that you don't do any of this DEI health equity research, even if you don't use federal money. That's disturbing. So I am deeply concerned that when it comes to research, when it comes to entities like health centers, hospitals, academic communities, government, all getting together to do cutting edge research to save lives today and in the future, that this will have a chilling effect, if not a stoppage of the kind of health equity research that we need and health equity programs that we all run.
Can we talk about, just as an example, something so basic we've discussed with you and other people in the healthcare industry for years, that medical trials through the decades have underrepresented non-white men, and they've discriminated against people of color and against women overwhelmingly. I'm assuming, without having thought a lot about this, that an effort to ensure that there's more equity even in trials is violative, if you're using federal funding, is violative of Trump's mandates. I'm right?
I'd imagine that if you characterize your DEI efforts, your health equity efforts as diversifying your clinical trials, then you are scrubbing your words. If you're life sciences, if you're pharma, you're trying to find different ways to explain what that work is. So I think people will, as my former CEO, my former predecessor, Jim Hunt, used to say, you have to repackage the Tylenol, call it something else. I think that'll work for a while. Repackaging will work. But the ultimate concern is if they say, you have to attest that you're not doing this work. That concerns me because we do need diversity. It's clear science, that in order to get the best outcome, you need a diverse pool of participants in the trial so that the treatment, so that the prescription, the drug works for everyone. But yet I can see an attack on that.
Talking to Michael Curry, head of the League of Community Health Centers in Massachusetts on the national board of the NAACP.
Williams College, when you look at those best colleges in America lists, Williams and Amherst are always kind of batting it out. Sometimes Swarthmore gets in there too. But anyway, Williams College is one of the best colleges in the country, small college up in Massachusetts, up in Williamstown. Well, anyway, they're one of the only, and they're the first and one of the only to say they're not going to take any federal research grants while they look at these ultimatums from the Trump administration. Again, they're small. They're not doing massive research like a Harvard is, but still they're doing it. And why do you think there aren't more people standing up to this in the college front?
Yeah, I mean, dollars matter, and I think it's masterful, right? If you wanted to attack racial justice, diversity, equity, inclusion, health equity, and all these things. Use the money, go after the dollars, because we're also relying on dollars to do public good, right? We know that we use research dollars. I have a fond memory of Williams College as I answered that question. Many years ago, Ayanna Pressley, I think, was a candidate for city council, or she was a newly elected city councilor. And Governor Patrick at the time had invited me, Ayanna, and a good friend, Marvin Vinay, to drive out to Williams College to greet the Congressional Black Caucus.
Oh, neat.
Because they were doing a speaking engagement. And when I tell you, that was a long drive. So we sat in that car, seemed like for days to get to Williams College. And then had to turn around at 10 o'clock and then drive that long drive back. So that was my experience. But it was a great forum. The college is a fabulous, highly regarded institution. And like Harvard, they're at a crossroad, right? Do we give up what our values are? Do we walk away from our values and what we know matters in research and in education? Or do we stand our ground? And stand our ground comes at a cost, literally losing funds. So they have to message this to their faculty, to their students, to their staff. They're going to have to pursue other funding sources. And I'll be honest with you, they've not said this, and I've not seen this anywhere. They'll take losses like the rest of us. That what comes is that you may have to switch some research to other universities. You may have to, cut back on the hiring to do that research. We'll all pay a price if Williams College and the many others, Harvard and others, are not allowed to do that research that will literally save our lives in the future.
Talking to Michael Carey.
So the Globe had a great story about what's happening on the ground in Mattapan and Dorchester since the Carney Hospital has been shut down. That was the Stewart Hospital in that horrible disgrace where they were stealing all the money. Well, I don't know if stealing. Well, maybe stealing is not too strong a word. I guess they were stealing the money.
While people are dying in their hospitals, as the Globe proved in their brilliant reporting.
Yeah. Anyway, they talk about how this woman who's 69 years old has to leave Mattapan for care, how the nearest emergency room is 3 miles away at the Brigham and Women Faulkner, how people have to spend 45 minutes on the bus to get to BMC because there's no more Carney Hospital. So you're on the big committee that's deciding what's going to happen with Carney Hospital. What's the latest?
So we did the report, and the report is done, and we put it out for public consumption for the governor and the mayor to sort of sift through and figure out what's possible to address the recommendations, the concerns that were expressed in the report from the community. And ultimately, it's about continue to provide care out of that site. Now, what it looks like in the future is for others to decide based on those recommendations, but there should be a need to address the lack of emergency room services in that community. People will have to travel much farther. I think the 3 mile distance from Dorchester to Faulkner Hospital, where I got my care as well, or Brigham's and Women's or Bethesda Related, that's a long distance in an emergency, in a crisis. Then two, people are transportation insecure, if that's the right phrase. And many people have to find ways. And I think that those reports that have come out that I think is 18% of people have access to, readily access to trains and major bus routes in Mattapan means that people have to walk distances. And I want you to take this in. If they're sick.
Yeah.
And if they're not emergency level, ambulance level sick, but they're transportation reliant sick, they got to do a bus to a train to maybe another train to get to care, maybe to another bus. That's unacceptable. So we got to figure out a way to solve the issue of Mattapan. And then we have to solve the issue, and I think it is theft is the right word, Marjorie, or the siphoning off of resources from a hospital that we rely on and siphoning out of Massachusetts is all true. So we got to figure out a way to make sure that the Carney Hospital site continues to provide care.
I know we do, well, I'll do one, a juxtaposition while we talk nonstop for the last few days about people being snatched off streets who are doing nothing other than trying to make a living, going to work, that sort of thing, threats of deportation scaring the hell out of people. Other than Malta, I know I've said this to you before, neither the Ralph De La Torre, the head of Steward, or the number 2 guy, who I think lives in Brookline, have been indicted in either federal or state courts in this country. And I have to say, I don't mean this rhetorically. I read every single word that the Globe in that investigative series did about the deaths of people directly attributable to the behaviors of the leaders of Stewart Hospital. We read Brian McGrory and his former colleague, the Globe stories about the self-enrichment, the donations to foundations and things that Ralph De La Torre was taking out of Stewart for personal use.
So stealing was not too strong a word, you're saying?
I mean, I think not. And there are no indictments. I mean, it's to me, not only is that an injustice, but it's basically a not so subliminal message to the other Ralph De La Torres of the world that in this era, with this Justice Department, there's probably a pretty good shot. And in all fairness, under Merrick Garland for a year or so too, there was absolutely no action, that there's no penalty for stealing and costing people their health and lives. I mean, do you have any understanding of why we haven't seen a damn indictment here?
I mean, I trust our law enforcement agencies when I particularly trust Andrea Cabral, our Attorney General. If there was a will, if there's an avenue, it would be possible. I think our laws don't always give us the means, the vehicle to hold people accountable for business practices.
Yeah.
And I think, I'm hoping, Jim, maybe the Hail Mary that neither one of us see at this particular moment is that somebody's looking and meeting right now to figure out how to hold them accountable.
Yeah, me too.
But if not, then we need to revisit our laws to see how we hold businesses accountable who are, and I'll use the term, I'm not sure it's the appropriate term, but predatory.
I agree.
That they came into Massachusetts in a community that most needs services, milked or stole the resources, the wealth from that entity, and left the community with no access to care. That should be actionable. That should be prosecutable. We have to figure out how to do that.
Well, I think it's worth pointing out at this juncture that the Department of Justice under Donald Trump, they have decimated the white collar crime division in an effort to go after other things like immigration. So that's part of the problem.
Yeah, but as I said, the Biden administration under Merrick Garland could have acted too.
They could have acted too, but I think the right direction is not to get rid of the people that do this sort of thing.
Michael, good to see you as always.
Thank you,
Thanks
Michael.
for your thoughts.
Good to see you both, always.
We've been speaking with Michael Curry, CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers and the board of the National NAACP. Thank you again to Michael. He's also co-chair of the city-led investigation into the impacts we just talked about of the closure of the Carney Hospital in Dorchester. Okay, coming up after a quick break, the late Brian Wilson has just died. He's from, of course, the Beach Boys, and apparently GBH's own Henry Santoro had a pretty interesting relationship with him. He's going to tell us about that. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
A lot of climate pollution in the U.S. comes from buildings and the energy they use.
If we're going to try to really combat climate change, it is looking at the existing buildings in this country.
But upgrading individual homes and businesses to use less energy is costly. So some researchers are asking, what about a whole block at once? More on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Rockport Music. The Rockport Chamber Music Festival opens June 13th, featuring pianist Angela Hewitt, violinist Joshua Bell, the Amani Winds, and more. Details at rockportmusic.org. And Harrow International School, New York, offering day and boarding education for grades 6 through 12 on a 170-acre waterfront campus on Long Island, opening this fall. More information is available at harrownewyork.com.
Yesterday, Beach Boys founder and one of the all-time great American songwriters, Brian Wilson, died, 82 years old. You're listening to the song Fun, 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 because it's one of the favorites of GBH's midday news anchor, Henry Santoro, who not I guess it's not coincidence, was inducted in the New England Music Hall of Fame not too long ago.
That's
Henry,
right.
it's great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for having me. We got to hurry up because I got a newscast to get ready.
Oh, that's a very good
Oh,
point.
hurry up. Okay. So you had a connection. You were at BCN for years. Was this a connection through BCN?
No, not at all. My sister is 3 years older than me, which was the perfect age for me to get turned on to the Beatles, to the Rolling Stones, and of course the Beach Boys. And my sister and all of her girlfriends would dance around the living room to old Beach Boys records, or new Beach Boys records back then. And once I got old enough to go to concerts myself, I said, I got to check this band out. And when you're a teenager and you've got raging hormones,
exactly,
you go to a Beach Boys concert, it's 90% women.
So how'd you end up on the
female.
stage?
I would always find my way down front, and I was dancing like a crazy kid. I had my little white Carter's tank top on and my painter's pants, and I was dancing like a crazy man. And they finally just pulled me up on stage one time, and then it happened again, and it happened again. So I was on stage with them at the Boston Garden. I was on stage with them at the Music Hall, which is now the Bach Wang Center, and they would just pull me up on stage, and they would kind of look for me.
That is fabulous story.
But I've seen them probably 40 to 50 times.
So speaking of 40, I listened to about 40 to 50 of their songs last night. How huge was the influence of Brian Wilson's music?
Absolutely massive. I mean, he was a musical genius. We lost two this week. We lost two musical geniuses, Sly Stone and Brian Wilson. And what Brian did, Brian took chances that nobody would ever take. And, he smacked the Beatles around, and they came out with their version of Pet Sounds, and he came out with his version of Rubber Soul. And it was this camaraderie thing that was going on.
But people like Paul McCartney admitted what a huge influence Brian Wilson was on his work.
Amazing. And understand, no digital back then. This was all analog. And Brian liked to use what he used to call found sounds. And they would, trains going down the train track. First guy, if you listen to the song Caroline No.
I did last night.
Absolute beautiful song. One of the most beautiful.
That's on Pet Sounds, isn't it?
That's on Pet Sounds. And you go to the last 17 seconds of the song, and all of a sudden you hear trains coming through and you hear dogs bark. Those are his dogs. He was the first guy ever to put barking dogs on a record. And it was just because it was found sounds.
And one of the sad things is, like Sly Stone, struggled, obviously, for a huge part of his life. Yeah.
The two of them really had struggles galore.
We should say Sly Stone, for those too young for this, beyond spectacular music.
Sly Stone,
first
Family
band
Stones.
with men and women, blacks and whites. I mean, that was unheard of.
Totally unheard
and
of.
also the star of Woodstock.
Do you
understand?
Just one quick thing about the raging hormones. So, I mean, to me, that was what the Beach Boys did. They captured that time in year in life when, they said, in my room.
Fun, in my room. Good vibrations.
Or wouldn't it be nice, which is all about, wouldn't it be nice if we could have sex, basically. But in those days, you couldn't have sex because there was no birth control. Right. So that's what it was all about.
Well, that was the precursor to sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
That's right.
But they really set it up. I mean, that surf rock sound that he created was
Surfing USA.
Surfing USA was second to none.
It was
California
three brothers.
Girls.
It was Love was
Dennis,
a cousin. Was the other one a cousin?
Al Jardine, no.
Okay, so three brothers and a cousin. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah. But Carl Wilson, Dennis Wilson died first. He was the drummer, and he was the one that was hooked up with the Manson gang, and he was heavily into drugs and alcohol. He fell off a boat and drowned in 1983. And then Carl Wilson died, I want to say like 2013, 2014. The Beach Boys did a
1998, says John. Who knows everything?
Yeah, there we go. But the Beach Boys did a 50th anniversary tour, and it stopped in Boston. It was at the Bank of America Pavilion, and I went, and it was just, they had turned into a Vegas act. I mean, it was just, I mean, I say to everybody that is in a band, sing your songs like you wrote them yesterday. Like when Mick Jagger sings Jumpin' Jack Flash for the 2,000th, 5,000th time, he sings it like he wrote it yesterday.
We heard him at Gillette a couple of months ago, and it's exactly
it's a perfect.
And that's why the Rolling Stones are not a Vegas act.
Yeah.
And and what's left of the Beach Boys now, Brian is gone, Carl is gone, Dennis is gone, and Mike Love still walks the earth. Yeah. But
I love the detail about his piano. He put it in his sandbox, in his dining room, so he could write music with his bare feet in the sand. I love that detail.
Yeah,
I want to say to proving that the Beach Boys have not lost their whatever with young people. My son got married about a week and a half ago, and what did he choose for me, his mother, to walk him down the aisle to? God only knows.
Is that so?
So we're going to go out. I got about halfway down the aisle, started bawling hysterically. But anyway, we're going to go out on singing "God Only Knows," which is one of Brian Wilson's great songs.
Henry, thank you.
You got it.
We'll hear you on the news coming up.
See you in about 6 minutes.
Thank you, Henry. Okay, we've been speaking with GBH Midday news anchor Henry Santoro with that great relationship with the Beach Boys. After the 1 o'clock news, food policy analyst Courtney Kummer is going to tell us about spaghetti costing $35 in some Boston restaurants and other food news. You're listening to BPR. I know. You're listening to BPR 89.7 GBH and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Join GBH and wealth planning strategist Jerry Doyle for From Paperwork to Peace of Mind. Doyle will share his knowledge on all stages of estate planning. Wednesday, June 18th at our Brighton studios. Register online at gbh.org/events.
Support for GBH comes from you and Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Insurance coverage from healthcare experts for businesses, individuals, families, and retirees. Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Learn more at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on the third hour of BPR. Going out to eat is getting prohibitively expensive. $35 for a plate of pasta in some places. Maybe the problem is we're looking for cheap dining in the heart of the city. One Boston reporter suggests schlepping out to the suburbs for a cheap meal. We'll talk with food policy analyst Courtney Kummer about this and the new Dirty Dozen list of grocery store produce that probably has a lot of pesticides in it.
I'm Marjorie Egan, and then it's my favorite day of the week, Am I the A-hole Day? So, what do you do if you're at a game night with your spouse's family and you're just dominating the checkers, the dominoes? It doesn't matter what games gets put in front of you, you are great at it. The family, sore losers. So, who's in the wrong? The woman who is exceptional at board games says, good game after every round to the others, or the family members embarrassed by their own losing. Weigh in next in the third hour of BPR 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. California's challenge of the president's deployment of U.S. troops to Los Angeles goes before a federal judge today. While Trump says he's reinforcing security against mass protests, Governor Newsom and other Democratic state leaders accuse Trump of inflaming otherwise largely peaceful demonstrations. President Trump has made immigration a key part of his agenda since before his first election. Citing public opinion polls, NPR's Domenico Montanaro reports on how people are viewing Trump's immigration policies now.
We've gotten some conflicting messages from poll respondents on this across various surveys. For example, just this week, a CBS poll found 54% approved of his deportation policies. But just yesterday, a Quinnipiac poll showed 56% disapprove. What that tells us, for people who watch politics closely, is that there's volatility in the numbers, and that means a certain percentage of people are open to being swayed, and that's when circumstances and political messaging here are really important.
NPR's Domenico Montanaro reporting. The U.S. military confirms a helicopter crash in Kentucky last night killed one soldier and injured another. According to a statement, the members of the 101st Airborne Division were taking part in a training at Fort Campbell. President Trump said he didn't think an Israeli strike on Iran was imminent. Then he told a reporter today, looks like something could very well happen. This as U.S. Embassy personnel in Israel are being advised to limit their travel. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi with more.
In a statement, the U.S. Embassy to Israel said its staff and their family members are restricted from traveling outside the greater Tel Aviv area, Jerusalem, and the southern city of Be'er Sheva. It said that the reason was, quote, increased regional tensions. On Wednesday, the U.S. State Department ordered the evacuation of non-essential staffers from the embassy in Iraq and authorized their departure from the embassies in Bahrain and Kuwait. Those regional tensions have been rising as the U.S. and Iran seem to be at a deadlock in talks over Iran's nuclear program. The U.S. wants to strike a deal with Tehran to limit the country's nuclear capabilities in exchange for lifting sanctions, which have crippled Iran's economy. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Inflation remained mild at the wholesale level last month in the U.S. NPR's Scott Horsley reports on the latest figures from the Labor Department.
Wholesale prices rose less than expected last month. The news comes a day after the government reported equally mild inflation at the retail level. Wholesale prices rose 0.1% between April and May and are up 2.6% over the last year. So far, there's little evidence that President Trump's tariffs are driving prices higher, although forecasters warn that could happen in the months to come. New applications for unemployment benefits held steady last week as about 250,000 people applied for jobless aid. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Nasdaq is up 48 points. The Dow has climbed 32. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. No reported injuries after a plane slid off the runway upon landing at Logan Airport. Happened just around noon, about an hour ago. JetBlue flight had been en route from Chicago. Massport says a ground stop is in place until 2 o'clock this afternoon as the situation is investigated. The plane is being assessed. Passengers are being bused to their terminal, but no injuries reported when a plane rolls off the runway and onto the grass at Logan. The MBTA board has approved the T's new fiscal budget for the new fiscal year that starts July 1st. GBH's Jeremy Siegel has details.
The new spending plan will help the T avoid what's been dubbed a fiscal cliff. Leaders say it should keep the system on track for at least the next year. TCFO Marianne O'Hara says that's thanks to new investments proposed by Governor Healy, combined with ridership numbers and fare revenue that are trending in the right direction.
The 26 budget is a lot more stable than 25's budget. So we're in much better situation financially than we were a year ago. It's night and day.
The exact amount of money the T will have access to is still up in the air as the Massachusetts House and Senate hammer out the state's overall budget. But MBTA leaders say no matter how those talks go, the T's finances are safe. Jeremy Siegel, GBH News.
Sunny mid-80s today, partly cloudy overnight tonight, low 60, then partly cloudy mid-70s tomorrow. Saturday could start out with some rain. Of course, it's Saturday after all, but we may see some sun in the afternoon, high only in the 60s. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include BetterHelp, committed to supporting mental health through therapy and helping clients find balance. Clients are matched with one of 30,000 therapists for online therapy from anywhere at betterhelp.com/public.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We're going to be back at the Boston Public Library tomorrow. On Tuesday, it's 1 to 2 with Ask the Mayor. Michelle Wu should be with us taking our questions and yours at the library. And also on Tuesday at 11:30, Ken Burns will zoom in, the great famed documentarian. Hello again, Jim.
Before we introduce our next guest, can I just read this to you from Politico?
Yeah.
Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth refused to say today whether he would follow the courts if they ruled against President Trump's deployment of active duty Marines in Los Angeles. Quote, "What I can say is we should not have local judges determining foreign policy or national security policy for the country." That's the way our constitutional system works. The Secretary of Defense is saying if Judge Breyer out there in California says that the actions of the Trump administration in their militarization campaign violated the Constitution or statutory law, he is not affirming that he will honor the court's decision.
Well,
I mean,
I don't know why you're so surprised by this. 3/4 of the stuff that Trump is doing is against the law and illegal, and the courts are trying to keep up with them. So
in any case,
it's kind of what they do, right?
It is what they do. We're joined on Zoom by food policy analyst, multiple James Beard winner, Corby Kummer. Corby's the executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, senior editor at the Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. We actually had a guy who teaches there on the radio with us the other day, who's one of the protesters who was arrested at Hanscom in a protest.
That's right.
And he loves you, Corby. I hope that's a good thing. In any case, hi, Corby. How are you?
Hi, Corby.
Great. Hey, great.
So we know that the so-called, as Trump calls it, the big, beautiful bill has gotten through the House. It's now in the Senate. And apparently a lot of senators are concerned. Maybe they've seen new polling that says that most Americans, including a significant numbers of Republicans, really do not want health care cuts. Many Republicans in many red states are on Medicaid. They don't want it. So now for another program that serves people who are don't have a lot of money, down on their luck, our SNAP, the food nutrition program. So what's happening with that?
What's happening is that the Congress tried to cut $300 billion in, I think, 3 years out of SNAP. And Republicans in the Senate are understanding that by shifting the burden to states, which is what the Congress tried to do, it, first of all, places an intolerable burden on states. They don't have the money to make up for this. But also, it's hitting farmers. It's hitting 40 million low-income Americans. So the Senate is echoing the House in saying states should pay more of the administrative costs, but of finding the people who need SNAP, signing them up. The requirements, which both Congress and Senate wants to increase as far as forcing them to say that they're looking for work, they're increasing that. They're not giving people with children a break under 8. I mean, they've raised the age limit of children who allow their parents to have a break from work requirements. They're lowering the age at which you don't have to look from 65 to 60. I think I've got those wrong. But Republicans are saying states can't afford to bear this burden, so we have to make it a little gentler. All of it, let us recall, is to fund a tax cut for billionaires.
Yeah, I want to reiterate something Corby's saying. This has nothing, Marjorie, to do with polling or concern for low and moderate income people, because as we've learned from Corby, a significant percentage of people who get food stamps or people have jobs, they're working, they're not making enough money. But they're doing it for the reason Corby said, because their concern has nothing to do with the plight of people in need. It has to do with the fact that they're worried their own local governors and legislators are going to scream at them because they're shifting the cost. The House does.
Well, I do
shifts
think
the cost of the program too much to states.
I also think that the people that get Medicaid and get food stamps are going to be a little upset too, I would think.
They may be, but read the statements of the people who are proposing these changes, including the chair of the Agriculture Committee, and it's all about burden on states. It's not about burden on people who are suffering. So can we go from really the sublime to the ridiculous? Everybody's heard of fine wine. There now is a movement, which Marjorie's going to ridicule me, but I'm really into this. The fine water movement. And can you explain what that movement, look at you, Marjorie. Could you explain what the movement is there, Corby Kummer, please?
Well, given that I would never point out that I have won a few James Beard Awards, and the main one was for a cover story in the New York Times Magazine about bottled water.
I didn't know that.
Oh my goodness.
I got their highest award there. I shouldn't even admit it, but I said it.
No, we're going to go look it up.
I shouldn't admit it. Then why did he say
about 2 years of my life just thinking about bottled water. Oh. In that case, what the Times Magazine was most interested in was the idea that yuppies didn't trust municipal water and they always needed a water bottle in their hand as a sort of security blanket. And why was that? So I was looking into the increased sales. But even then there was enormous uproar among many municipalities that Aquafina and Dasani, which are respectively PepsiCo and Coke's bottled water offerings are just taken from municipal aquifers. And they just filter them, and in the case of Aquafina, Pepsi, they add back minerals to give them flavor, because, you know, if you used to buy bottles of distilled water for like your iron or something, yes, it's awful to drink. And so they would add back minerals. And I did, you know, I tasted dozens of kinds of water, and I was in water tastings of the kind that my pal Kim Severson of the Times is writing about now, in which sommeliers are offering very expensive bottles of water. A couple of things the article doesn't touch on are that even Perrier and Evian and other waters that are so-called bottled from the source, which means they don't need to add back minerals because they've chosen them because, for example, they're in volcanic soil, which is very mineral rich, and especially if it's magnesium, that's the sweetest, milkiest water that I always loved. Magnesium in Evian, for example, Fiji water has delicious minerals in it. But now, Evian and Perrier, these actual spas that took a flight in the late 19th century with middle-class Europeans, they're so close to industrial factories and sites that the manufacturers have to filter the water. So they're leaving out, we're filtering this water just like everybody else. And then maybe we're adding back some minerals. So the new ultra premium water is taking brands that are farther away from industrial pollution and saying we have wonderful, pure flavored water. Don't you want to spend a fortune on this, Jim Browdy?
You know,
so
let
what,
me
what? I've never even heard of fine water until today.
Well, I want to be clear.
Is there a brand?
Well, no, it's all different kinds of water, but it's both still and carbonated, right? Am I right about that or not?
Yeah, let me disillusion you about carbonated water like Perrier that's also taken from the source. It comes out, they take out all the gas, because by the time they pump it up from, I don't know how many hundreds of feet below Earth it is, the gas is kind of dissipated. What they're allowed to do is add back carbonation to the same level that it originally came out without so much industrial pumping. So they're already putting back carbon dioxide into the water. They're just limited to the natural level.
Let me just say two things. One, I know I'll be ridiculed for this, but as Marjorie knows, not the first part, the second part, 98% of what I drink is water and coffee. I drink almost no alcohol, as Marjorie knows. I can tell the difference. I really can. If you put out 10 waters in front of me, I'm raising my... This is the part where you're going to ridicule me. Look at the face on it.
No, I think...
I can tell the difference between 10 waters. Now, here is a sommelier. Okay. Is this guy's name Martin Rees? Is that how you say his name? In any case, he's being interviewed. He's a water sommelier.
Water sommelier.
I said that, Marjorie. He is Martin Rees. He's a water what?
Sommelier.
Thank you. He's being interviewed by Conan O'Brien back in 2020. Listen up.
It's all these waters. Now, don't they all just taste like water? I hate to sound ignorant, but doesn't it just taste like water?
Yes and no. So they're all definitely water. So they're all coming from the same source, because up from the air, because it's all rainwater at one point.
Yes.
And they're dripping down, raining down of the different salts and different layers of the grounds.
Exactly.
And the water going through different layers, the same like wine kind of. And they're taking mineral.
Well, we didn't like what he had to say, so we decided to cut him off. So check out this story, Kim Severson in the New York Times.
I'm confused. Okay, first of all, since you got one of the big James Beard Award for writing this piece about bottled water, what's your recommended, unless it's changed dramatically, what's your recommended bottled water?
Evian, Fiji, Apollinaire, and any number, and Fuji, and south of Rome.
What is wrong with you? Topo Chico is about as great. Have you ever had Topo Chico, in your life?
Oh, I really like Topo Chico.
Okay.
Wait, what was he? We interrupted him. What are you going to say?
It's very highly carbonated.
It is.
It's sort of a better flavored Canada Dry seltzer, which is completely arbitrary level. They decide they're going to add the carbon dioxide. I like Topo Chico a lot. It's got a good flavor, and they add a lot of carbon dioxide to it.
So Zoe just said it has the highest percentage of microplastics. So other than that, it's really tasty.
But wait a minute. So we want to look for water that has a high count of minerals as well, right? That's what you want to look for?
Yes, but it's magnesium. I discovered the minerals that I liked best.
Okay.
in water.
Read his piece.
Okay.
By the way,
Okay.
you want a polar seltzer? I got an extra polar. Do you want a polar?
What is the fine
No,
water
she
that
doesn't
we
want
should be getting today in 2025?
Read the article.
Well, the people at home would
I forgot about
perhaps
them.
like
They're
to
listening.
know what you might recommend now of these fine waters.
He just did.
Those were the regular waters.
Oh, they are. No,
No, they're
fine
not
waters.
so regular.
Oh, they're fine waters.
Fine waters. They're
Okay,
fine waters.
Okay.
They're
Evian,
fine.
Okay.
Fiji,
Okay, let me
Try-
ask you one more stupid question.
Oh, my God.
Since I've heard about Fiji and Apollinaire, Fuji, whatever it
Yeah.
is, and Evian and all these things for years, they're just being rediscovered now? This is
Yes,
supposed to be a
Marjorie.
fine
Courtney
order
and I are
craze.
rediscovering, and Kim Severson, we've
Okay.
rediscovered them. Okay, let's move on. Jesus.
Okay. All right.
Fine water. Just check it out.
I thought there was something new.
Yeah, there is something
Okay,
new.
here's something that's not so new.
This
the
is
idea
useful.
That it is useful. Every once in a while, we do something useful, Jim.
Really?
There's this dirty dozen list of these pesticide-laden produce that now includes not just strawberries, kale, spinach, etc., but blackberries and potatoes. So I guess what are we to make of this? This is a troubling story about all these pesticide-laden fruits and vegetables.
Okay, it's not troubling for a mother of young children or any kind of person shopping for berries and fresh fruit. The lessons of this environmental working group, very good publicity generator. They do pesticide residue measurements. It's a very useful consumer guide to an extent. Because most of the pesticides they're talking about, not all, have been approved. You'd have to have an enormous amount to do any kind of damage, although children and pregnant women are very susceptible even to low level of pesticides on fruit. The dirty dozen are often fruit that have been harvested in berries so that they you really want to make sure that you wash them if you're going to eat them raw. The clean 15, which I didn't remember from previous stories about the dirty dozen, which I read every year, include mostly fruits and vegetables that you peel. And so the pesticides and the surface stuff. The new information, I think, for all of us was potatoes, and that there's an anti-sprouting agent and storage preservative. And because it's sprayed just before they're shipped, unlike the pesticide residues in other kinds of fruits, which were during the planting and during the growing before harvesting, it's much fresher and they're higher levels. So I'm going to scrub potatoes much more thoroughly. Now let me get to my main point, which is you should be having lots of fruits and vegetables. You should wash them before you peel them so that you don't transmit any kind of residues from your knife, your peeler, your parer, your cutting board. But organic is lowest in residues and best for the health of the workers, because the people who really suffer are the workers.
Well, isn't that burning the lead? I mean, isn't that the whole point of the survey on the dirty dozen? And by the way, the dirtiest, in quotes, spinach, just in order, strawberries, kale, grapes, peaches, etc. The whole purpose of this, I thought, was to say, when you're on the dirty dozen non-organic list, this should prompt you for these particular fruit and produce things to buy organic. And when it comes to pineapples, as an example, because it's got a shell or whatever you call it, there's less of a reason to buy organic there. Isn't that one of the major points of this, or did I miss some?
A peel, a rind, or a skin, you can call it.
Whatever it is. No, but isn't
a
that
major point is that you should think about workers who are the ones really placed.
You're absolutely right.
I think, though, that what gets attention, and the reason this is a highly publicized story, the EWG, Environmental Working Group, has been very clever to do every year, is people worry about their own health. It's always good to be concerned about your family's health, but in this case, it's more important to be concerned about the worker's health.
Okay.
By the way, a friend of ours just, Zoe mentioned the plastics. A friend of Marjorie and mine just texted me, Topo Chico, which I was raving about, has had huge PFAS problems, forever chemical problems, which they're reducing. So forget everything I said.
I thought you were talking about Topo Chico.
No, that's
mouse.
Ed Sullivan. That was 80 years ago. He was a little mouse on his hand.
Topo Chico.
Hi, Eddie.
No, what
Eddie. Eddie.
That's how Topo Chico, is a hand puppet, said hello to Ed Sullivan. He said,
Hello, Eddie. I love you, Eddie.
Go ahead. No, I shouldn't. Sorry.
I would never disbelieve or argue with Zoe, but all the Topo Chico I've ever had is in glass bottles.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure where the exposure comes from, but I'm sure it comes from someplace.
Well, I'm reading Food and Wine, and they say there's a real PFAS problem. I've only had it in glass bottles, too.
It's
By the
hard
way, I
to
want you to know,
wash strawberries.
Marjorie is raging over the fact that you refuse to provide a full list of fine water to her. I can tell on her face. She is furious.
Well, I'm sort
Furious.
of confused, but the rage about the water that's been here for a while, I guess that's what's confusing me. But we'll move on.
Let me emphasize what I always emphasize, which is just taste the water from your tap in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Taste your water at the studio, taste it out of the water cooler, and decide for yourself, which do I like best.
Do you see what I'm drinking right here, Corby Comer?
Yeah,
Can you
Polar
see this?
Seltzer.
Polar Seltzer.
That's right.
Made in Worcester.
I can tell what you like is high carbonation, Jim.
The higher, in fact, I have one of those. What's the machine called?
They call him Mr. Bubbles here at the studio.
No, not a Soda Stream. Thank you, Zoe. I have a Soda Stream.
Soda Stream.
Excuse me. The maximum carbonation is level 4.
Oh.
But I'm not done, Marjorie. I don't just use level 4. I use level 4 twice. What do you think of that?
Me too, but you have to, because it's a lie. It's never adequate.
It's like an investigative report right here.
Wow.
Okay, so Corby won the James Beard Award, one of his many, for the front page. He worked only 2 years on bottled water. We're talking to Corby Comer.
So we're going to move on now to find out why, if you go out for a restaurant in Boston, it's going to cost you $35 for a bowl
That's
of rigatoni.
not fair, but that's not a fair way to introduce
Okay,
this.
go ahead,
Prices are up.
Mr.
But they're
Restaurant.
It's not $35 for spaghetti and meatballs, but prices are going up because of Trumpism. One, tariffs on the Cape. The story that starts in the Globe about Max Fish House in Wellfleet. I ate there 2 Saturday nights ago. They're having a real problem getting staff because, as you know, since you live you're on weekends on the Cape or whatever, is most of the staff in the summer are kids from Eastern Europe, South Africa, places like that, are having real visa problems. So their prices are going up, and some people are saying, some experts are saying, if you can't afford the prices in the city and you really want to go to a restaurant, which we all want people to do, go to the suburbs. How do you feel about that?
I think it's great to patronize restaurants that are owned by single operators or mom and pops and not chains. Anything that can get you to a restaurant where you know the person you're giving business to is great. And if it's more affordable in suburbs and you can afford the time, that's really good. The main reason in the very good Boston Globe piece with lots of interesting charts is that food prices are going up. They're unpredictable. As Chris Coombs from DuAve, it's spelled DuAve, at the Boston Chop House says, store owners can stockpile stuff from China, wondering what's going to happen with tariffs. But we have to order fresh every couple of days. We can't stockpile. We don't know what tariffs are going to do to our imported ingredients. Meanwhile, local seafood prices are going up. Just ingredient prices are going up. And as Will Gilson from his series of Cambridge restaurants points out, my rent isn't going to go down and my labor isn't going down, it's going up. And so if ingredient prices go up, there's very little restaurants can do except pass it on to the consumer, which they really don't want to do because James Beard and other surveys say if restaurants raise their prices, say 15%, to be anything like realistic to reflect the cost increases they're facing, diners drop precipitously and don't come to them at all. So they want the diners to keep coming in, but they're lower check. Instead of having 2 apps, they're having 1 app. Instead of having a bottle or half bottle of wine, they're ordering 1 cocktail. So their margins are going way down and their expenses aren't going down. They're just staying the same or going up.
Are we close to like some major horrible reckoning in the independent restaurant world? I mean, it seems like every week we talk to you, there's another series of bad news stories.
The only reason I say maybe not is because we were so close during the pandemic and many, not all by any means, many restaurants came back. So we have to keep watching it and wonder. So much of what the administration does regarding tariffs is when enough business owners yelp, they will pull it back. So restaurant owners have to hold out and wonder what's going to happen.
By the way, the thing we mentioned at the beginning, the staff visa thing, and I know it's not just the Cape, but that's what Marjorie and I are most familiar with. Virtually every place I eat during the summer when I'm on the Cape, and I assume you too, Marjorie, the kids who are there providing most of the busing and serving and that sort of thing are kids from, international whatever placements kind of thing.
Lots of times the YMCA camps too. They're full of kids from other countries.
What are they doing about that?
I don't know.
There's no fix for that, right? Except fewer hours or fewer tables, or if the kids can't come, you're really sort of screwed, right?
The restaurants close. Restaurants will stop serving lunch or cut out a night or two, depending on of dinner a week, depending on what the staffing situation is. Also, Cape Cod, as you know, and the Globe has been pointing out a lot, is very worried about Canada tourism, which is already down a lot since last year, and is showing no signs of coming back. And Rhode Island has already been hit, as a good recent piece in the Globe said. And even though Boston has generally not been a complete rival of Rhode Island's, a lot of that business is probably going to go to Boston before it comes back to Rhode Island. And then Boston family vacations are already going way down. People are shortening them or they're canceling them. It's 4- and 5-star expensive hotels that are holding firm or rising.
Can I say one last thing before you go? Margie and I spend a lot of time on the show talking about how passive the American people are. Even they're aggrieved, more often than not, they send a tweet rather than taking action. The Canadians, I don't mean this as a joke, by the way. The Canadians are really upset with the United States
some of these pesticides.
Over tariffs, over this 51st state BS coming out of Donald Trump. And what are they doing? They're voting with their dollars by deciding not to come to the country that is led by the person who is damaging their economy.
We're talking, Corby, all the time about the obesity and the chronic disease problem in this country, and a lot of it's coming from food. That's one thing RFK is right about. Why don't we ban some of these things? They've banned that extra pesticide in France on the potatoes. They've banned a lot of the stuff
because
that we just
this country is owned by industry.
That's right, because this country is owned by industry. Now, a lot of texters are very upset that Jim is shattering the false impression he's a coastal elite with a stall bottle of Topo Chico and other assorted mineral waters.
No, one of the reasons I really like Topo Chico is I like high plastic content in my water.
Okay.
Always found that to be very tasty.
And one more thing, there's a lot of popular demand. I don't know, Corby, if you have a Topo
this will
Chico
be good. I can
imitation you'd like to do, but people would like you to do the Topo Chico imitation from Ed Sullivan.
Eddie, I love you, Eddie.
By the way, this little puppet was on TV like in 1920. You have to be like 100 years old to remember this.
But early to middle 60s.
Whatever it was. So he was great.
Did you like Topo Chico on the Ed Sullivan Show, Corby?
Did you like Topo Chico?
No.
Okay, good.
No, except that my father always said "okay." And lots of things. It really had an influence on the culture. So I still use expressions my father picked up from the Ed Sullivan Show.
Corby, I love you, Corby.
Okay, goodbye, Corby. Corby Comer. It's great to see you. I've totally humiliated myself, and I've
been speaking
nothing to say.
with food policy analysts, and multiple J's appeared winner, including his extensive piece on
2 years he worked on the piece.
2 years, Corby Comer. That's right, because he's a real reporter. He's also executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute. By the way, it's really hard to win a James Beard Writing Award. I mean, creme de la creme. That's Corby Comer. He's also a senior editor at The Atlantic and a senior lecturer at the Tufts School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Coming up after a quick break, Jim's going to do a few more.
I'm not. By the way, it appears, I don't want to destroy this company. It appears that Topo Chico, I don't know if it's eliminated. We'll check into this. It's PFAS problem. It has clearly addressed its PFAS problem.
Okay.
I don't know how far.
Okay. Am I the A-hole Day is coming up. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.6 Topo Chico.
No, it's not. That is not Topo Chico. We'll be right back.
I'm Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, a month after pleading guilty to federal corruption charges, Boston City Councilor Tanya Fernandez Anderson says she is resigning effective July 4th. And Boston's emergency food network was already strained before the closure of 3 major food suppliers. Now 50,000 pounds of food donations are gone. That and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Harrow International School, New York, offering day and boarding education for grades 6 through 12 on a 170-acre waterfront campus on Long Island, opening this fall. More information is available at harrownewyork.com. And American Repertory Theater, with the hit musical rom-com Two Strangers Carry a Cake Across New York. The Boston Globe calls it clever, funny, and delightfully surprising. Now playing. amrep.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Live Music Friday is tomorrow, and Roots Alley Collective, which is appearing at this year's BAMS Fest, will be joining us. So welcome to Marjorie's segment of the week. It's another round of Am I the A-Hole? Our question this week, how to dominate your boyfriend's family game night without making everyone hate you. Here's the scenario, which our team found as usual on Reddit. A young woman is meeting her boyfriend's family in her 20s, is meeting her boyfriend's family for the first time, and they have this monthly family game night the family does. She's feeling a little insecure because her education and career are not what theirs is. She dropped out of college. She's currently working in retail. All of them, this guy's family, have advanced degrees. One of them, I think, from MIT, if I'm right, Marjorie, I think. Marjorie is looking in the garbage because she threw out her script and everything else, and she's literally going through the recycling as I'm speaking. Now, this young woman is not insecure, however, about her ability to win at checkers or dominoes or trivia. Game after game, this woman cleans house, all while making a point to be very sportsmanlike. She shakes the losers' hands. She cheers on her teammates. She's not gloating. She said they did a great job. But after winning the final round of Trouble, her boyfriend essentially rushes her out of the house. On their drive home, he tells her that she's embarrassed his family.
Can you believe it?
That she was being a show-off and a sore winner. And you know what? They haven't spoken since. So here's the number at 877-301-8970 to call or a text. Does the boyfriend have a point? Could she have done more to allow her partner's family to win? I don't know, maybe one round of checkers. Or is the problem that she's dating a guy who comes from a family of sore losers? To the top of the hour, we want to know who is the a-hole. The woman for not throwing a game or two, or the boyfriend, the whiny boyfriend, who was upset because his girlfriend was competent enough to beat his family in all their games. Who's the a-hole, Marjorie? 877-301-8970.
Well, first of all, what Texas says, the line from Topo Gigio is, Eddie, kiss me goodnight. That's what Topo Gigio said.
I'll do that in a few minutes.
Want to try it?
I'll do it for you in a minute. Yeah, sure, why not?
All right. Clearly, the family are jerks here. You know, you didn't get into the details.
Not the family. They're not complaining, are they? Are they complaining?
She dropped out of school after 2 years, right? And they made a lot of comments about how she dropped out of school because the other ones were like, one of them's going to MIT, and the other one's going to go to law school. Yeah, okay. You missed that part. Yep. And then, because she comes from a southern state, which has lousy education, like Alabama or Mississippi, they're all making jokes about that, how she comes from this dumb state where they all say, bless your heart. They made a bunch of bless your heart jokes.
Oh, I didn't know that part. I was too busy reading it.
I just found my story in the garbage. You should have read your story.
Well, you know why I didn't read it more carefully? Because I was studying fine water. That's why I couldn't read it. Okay, keep going.
So this woman, they're kind of ridiculing her as thinking, Elijah, the boyfriend, has got a dumb girlfriend because she dropped out of school. So she gets down there and she beats him in all the games, as you say. She checkers,
so the boyfriend
dominoes.
and his family are the a-holes.
Absolutely.
I would say that is ridiculous.
Okay.
And the reason it's ridiculous is when you're bludgeoning a whole family, first of all, the fact they have family game night in and of itself is pathetic.
Trivia games, she loved them.
They have monthly family game night. Yes, she did.
No, she didn't.
She won every game. And the least she could have done as a newbie to the family, she's meeting these people for the first time, would it have hurt her to throw a game or two to make the other people feel better?
After they ridiculed her with this constant stream of bless your hearts. Isn't that what you say in Mississippi?
Well, can I tell you what the deal is?
You dropped out of college after 2 years.
The thing that you were ignoring intentionally,
what am I ignoring?
Because it helps you, both of his parents are ready to die. They're all really old.
They're only in their 60s, and they're retired teachers, and they have master's degrees.
Okay, forget that part.
They're all a bunch of college educated elites. That's what they are. A
fine.
bunch of
All
elites.
I want to say, I'll say it
again. And she was this poor kid from Mississippi.
Okay, I heard that already, Marjorie. All she has to do is throw him a bone or two, drop a game or two. Wouldn't have killed her. Everybody would have left a lot happier. Otherwise, it's like they feel like she's trying to show she's something special.
You left this out too. The mom told the boyfriend that the girlfriend that won all the games was lying about being a dropout because otherwise she couldn't have done so well. If you don't go to school, in other words, you can't be any good at trivia. And then the boyfriend accused the girlfriend of lying as well.
Okay, we're going to get to your calls in a second, but apparently, which I'm pretty proud of because of our discussion, Topo Gigio is apparently on line one. Topo, welcome to the show. How are you?
I haven't seen you in such a long, long time.
Oh, this is racist in addition to everything else. Okay, enough of Topo Gigio. Thank you.
Kiss me hello.
Kiss me hello. Okay, fine. Maybe I shouldn't have brought that
He's
up.
an Italian mouse.
Oh, it's an Italian thing.
I think so.
Okay, fine. Okay,
Topo Gigio.
Let's get back
he wear
to
a little
this.
red, white, and blue shirt.
He did?
Yeah, and he had big, huge ears.
I think my imitation is better than Topo
It is. Do it again.
Gigio's sound.
Eddie, kiss me, Eddie.
That's what he said. Chris in Cape Cod, you're first on who is the a-hole or whatever this is. Hello there. Hi.
I guess if I'm going to vote, I'm going to say the family is.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
Yeah. Well, you play a game to win, and I firmly believe that. So, I played a game of Scrabble early on with my wife over 20 years ago, and I beat her resoundingly, and she kind of got weepy over it and couldn't believe it because she was a lit major and I'm a business major. And I think, people want to believe about things about themselves. And
that's right.
Many things can be true at the same time. But, I grew up in a competitive family, and we love words and vocabulary, and knowing the strategy of the game is a big part.
When you added the word, when you said I beat her and then you paused and said resoundingly, it makes it sound to me like this is still a bone of contention 20 years later in the family. Is it?
Here's the bone of contention.
What
She
is-
won't play with me. She's never played with me since.
Chris, that is a fabulous story to start this discussion off. That is
the only
great.
time
Thank
you're
you.
supposed to let somebody win is if you're playing with kids. You don't want to beat your 3-year-old at Candyland. You know what I mean? You want to let the kids win.
Do you know my younger daughter? Every single time she was when she was really little, like 4 or 5. Every single time she would be losing a game, wasn't even over. That was the critical point.
Yeah.
She would turn over the table, no matter what the game was we were playing, and storm out of the room. Now, see if you agree with this.
Okay.
Sig in Tewksbury basically is saying I'm a sexist. Why should women have to dumb themselves down for men or others? It's not all
Exactly.
men. If others have a problem, bright women sometimes have to do that to make others feel better. But how does that make them feel? What do you think of her point? Or
I
his
think
point, or their
that
point?
is a great point. Women do that all the time.
Yeah.
And somebody else points out, like I do, that the boyfriend is the a-hole here, and his family are a bunch of 8-year-olds. They should grow up. It's like if you ever go to somebody's house and people are playing Jeopardy. Some people are really into Jeopardy, and someone is there who clearly knows all the answers, and somebody else doesn't know any of them.
Yeah.
How do you handle that, Jim? Because I'm sure you think
I can tell you I've done it. I've gone to many houses where they're playing Jeopardy. I have thrown 50% of the matches because it's pretty obvious that it would have been a walkover in all these cases. So
Okay.
I always get something wrong that I knew what the answer was. It's sort of a hospitable kind of thing, I guess.
Anne from Acton said she is better off without this guy and his family. They need a mail-order PhD for the boyfriend.
Here's
I like
a good.
that one.
Why don't you read Geo? I think this is a really
Geo
good
in New
text.
Hampshire. Originally, I thought that the family were a-holes, but after hearing Jim's opinion, I must say once again that Jim is the a-hole.
That generally is the outcome.
That's
of
a
these.
frequent. That's a frequent.
That's a common refrain.
Yeah,
here on
that's
the show.
right. That's right. And here's a good one. The girlfriend needs to run as fast as she can from this family. If the family were winning, they would be rubbing it in her face all the time. Good for the dropout of college girl to be sweeping the games.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jim and Milton, you're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Oh, thanks, guys. Not to get back to Topo Gigio.
Oh, feel free. Yeah, go ahead. Feel free.
Make fun of Topo Gigio as you will.
Yeah.
Senor Wences, who was actually Topo
Senior
Gigio,
Wences, right? Yeah.
lived to be 106.
He did?
He did?
And I think that Topo Gigio is a part of Americana.
He is.
I love Topo Gigio.
I loved him, yeah. How old was the guy when he died again?
106.
Yeah, you know what he said, Marjorie? He said,
What did he say?
Eddie, kiss me. Because he was really old at the time. Jim, thank you. We didn't know that. Senior Wences was his handler, I guess, for lack of a better expression.
They have Topo Gigio dolls on Etsy. They're kind of expensive.
Yeah, well, it's because Topo Gigio was 60 years ago. That's why.
$63 now for one. A lot of people are there's all sorts of Topo Gigio is big, Jim.
It's amazing.
I'm looking at this, like a million different websites. You can get T-shirts. You can get them in his original little red, white, and blue T-shirt.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go to Simon. Simon in Hopkinton. Sorry.
Hello, Simon. How are you?
I'm fine. You guys?
Yeah, I think we're fine. Thank you.
I've been listening to. Oh, good.
Yeah, good.
I've been listening to this, and I don't understand why, Jim, you feel that this woman is needs to dumb herself down to accommodate a group of family members that are probably looking down their noses at her because she didn't graduate from college. And on a related note,
please,
all graduating from college really has to go for it is you can take a test to pass it. Doesn't mean you know anything. It just means you can pass the test.
Excellent point.
Well, I have to say, Simon, even though you're very critical of me, that was a fine phone call, and thank you for you made some excellent points there. 877-301-8970. Could you, for people who just tuned in, can you relay out the dispute here between the girlfriend, the boyfriend, and the family, if you would, his family?
But I also want to tell you that there is a Topo Gigio keychain, a Topo Gigio piggy bank, a talking Topo Gigio.
Kiss me hello.
There's a Mexican Topo Gigio and an Italian Topo Gigio. so Topo Gigio is huge.
You know what you get on Etsy? A stuffed Ed Sullivan. It's unbelievable.
Well, he was always a straight man, right?
He was.
I mean, he was always a straight man. When he had like the Beatles on, when that was like a big thing all across the country,
that was their first American appearance.
That's right. But he was very there. Were they on Sunday night?
I don't remember.
I don't remember. Anyway, so here's. Thank you, John. It was Sunday night. Says John, and John knows everything, as we know.
He does.
So here's the deal. This 24-year-old woman is going out with a guy who's 28, and she goes to meet the family. He's invited her to meet the family.
Yeah,
that's right. And it turns out everybody in the family has a lot of higher education. The parents have master's degrees. The Aunt Vera went to MIT. The brothers are in the middle, about to graduate from four-year colleges. The cousin is heading off to law school. So they have a lot of degrees and pedigrees. And they're quite condescending, I should say, to the 24-year-old who dropped out of college after 2 years. And worst of all, she comes from a southern state that's lousy in education. It doesn't say which one. But Mississippi's a poor state. Alabama's a poor state.
Arkansas are the worst.
It could be
schools
Arkansas.
In the country
Could be Arkansas. And they're all making remarks.
You don't need to emphasize all the things that are bad for my position, by the way.
And they're also saying,
keep going here.
Bless your heart, which is something that people that are obnoxious Northerners say to people that are
Michael
from the
Graham
South.
used to say that. Remember,
That's right.
a former
Where was he from?
colleague?
South Carolina or something like that.
Yeah.
So anyway, when it comes to the game time, she is, trying to control herself over this rudeness to her, and she wipes them out basically in checkers, in dominoes, 3 different trivia games. 1 she won herself, and 2 she won solo. And then we started playing Trouble. Do you know how to play Trouble? I don't know how to play Trouble. No. Anyway, she beat them, and the boyfriend is very upset about it, and so is his mother and the rest of the family. And the mother accuses her of lying about dropping out of college, because certainly no one who dropped out of college could beat them all in their trivia games.
Okay.
So good for her.
And by the way, you didn't add the fact that when he pulls her out of the house and they're driving home, that was the last time they spoke.
That's right.
Because he was so incensed. And I did say, which I have some regret about, that I thought she was the a-hole, because I thought in a fair world, and I missed some of the elements that you described, you give a little so that everybody goes home happy. But I missed the part where they were treating her poorly, and so I feel somewhat reluctant to take that
good idea to read the
position.
story, Jim. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Next time I will. Erin in Brookline, you're on Boston Public Radio with Marjorie Egan and me, Jim Browdy. Who's the a-hole, please? Go.
Definitely the family, and lots of people have already made the point about the dumbing down thing, which I was going to say.
Yeah.
But as a woman having to do that, and I've never ever consciously done that myself that I know of, it's insulting to be expected to do that. So I guess I will say that I never believe in throwing a game. I know the guy before talked about, you're playing to win, right? But also, as long as you're not a bad winner about it, what's the problem? I mean, I don't even let kids win if I was babysitting or something, because, when are they going to learn? They have to learn how to fail. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. But
excellent points.
Also,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
You keep going. You're doing great. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. It occurred to me that the woman, I mean, some of the smartest people that I know, went to 4-year colleges, grad school, or whatever, they have no common sense or street smarts. So,
there you go.
Excellent point.
Have at it, woman. You did a great job. And I'd be more wondering why I'm not even going to say man, boy is not standing up for you, and why he was not peeved that his family treated you that way.
Let me tell you, that analysis was very persuasive. That was excellent.
Very nuanced. Thank you very much.
It wasn't nuanced at all. It was like right in your face kind of thing.
The little facts
she
that
broke
led
it
her
down.
to her
Is that what you
conclusion.
meant? She broke it down. Yeah.
Here's Sean in the car. My brother and I were in middle school. He would beat me in every chess game every single time. The one time I was about to beat him, he bumped the table so all the chess pieces would tip over. To this day, he will not admit that he did it on purpose.
Wow.
And then Jim, this texter says, is being sexist. He would never expect a boyfriend to throw the game. How about that, Jim?
I know people choose to believe that for their own purposes, but I would feel the exact same way if the gender situation were reversed.
Okay.
Do you not feel, I mean, I missed the
Here's Tina.
condescending part of it. Don't you think had it not been for the condescension?
Yeah, they shouldn't have made fun of her.
Which I admittedly, I missed that part. Okay. Had it not been for the condescension, would you not agree? You're just meeting the family for the first time. Throw one damn game.
If not for that, yes.
Okay, well, I missed that part of the story, so I was right.
The story's only 3 paragraphs long, Jim.
I was doing other things. I was eating lunch, so I only had time to read one paragraph.
Okay, listen to this. Jim, the family are a bunch of snobby a-holes. They deserve to revenge. I'm going out for a smoke. You're ticking me off.
Wow.
Says Tina.
Those are strong words from Tina. Martha in Bolton, welcome to the show. Who's the a-hole, please?
I think his family is.
Oh.
Yeah.
Why is that, please? Why is that?
Just they're not liking, saying, hey, I'm from Mississippi, okay?
Oh.
So,
there you go. Do you listen to that all the time, the bless your heart stuff?
Well, I moved up here a long time ago, and I learned, not everybody can do this, but I actually lost my accent to some degree.
You did?
To some degree.
I stopped talking like a Southern belle, and I also stopped smiling so much.
What is Southerners smile? They smile a lot.
They're much more friendly. Don't you think?
Hello?
I think we lost her. We don't even know who we're talking to. It's okay. Who are you? Who are you exactly?
Oh, she's gone. Whoever she was, she's disappeared.
She's gone. Okay.
Okay. Clearly, the family are a-holes. They sound like pretentious babies. They were being sore losers, as well as mocking her education and for being from the South.
Now, here's a really, really fine text based on all of the contextual details from Marjorie's garbage copy, meaning she pulled it out of the garbage. They are all a-holes and deserve each other. Bless their hearts. That's, of course, from Topo Gigio in Cambridge. Thank you.
We just got a text from someone who says they have their Topo Gigio doll left over from the 1960s. They've saved it their whole life.
You know how much that's probably worth?
Probably worth a lot of money. Some of them are selling for Etsy, but those are newer versions.
They're newer versions,
of Topo Gigio and his little
the older
white blue
versions
T-shirt.
are really good.
Yeah. Okay.
Does anybody think, any of these callers agree with me? Can we get any of those? There's none of them. Okay, fine. Let's go to Ian in Hyannis. Welcome to the show. Hi there. How are you?
Hi, I'm really great, and once again, both the hosts and the call-ins are running away with any of my smart points.
Well, make them again. See if you can make them a little better, Ian. Go ahead.
I will do one better. There used to be a game called Class Warfare.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Kind of card game, vaguely like Monopoly. And the Christmas that my family played it together, my sister, brother, and I ganged up on Dad, who was the capitalist class,
Yeah.
and we trounced them. The revolution survived.
Wow. It's a hell of a moment for the family. Ian, thank you for sharing
now,
that with us.
Here is someone who's really thought through this.
What is it?
There is a reason why you usually let children win sometimes. It's because they won't play with you anymore if they only lose. This is game etiquette that people learn that as they get older. That if you are winning every game, then the other player will very quickly lose interest, and you need to modulate your ability
So this person's
to
with
win
me.
accordingly. And they have actually figured this out, Jim.
Is this person with me?
They are with you.
Okay, go. Keep
They
reading.
say 70-30 win rate is about where you want to be.
I agree with that.
And that's you don't want to go beyond that.
70-30.
And you don't want to certainly go beyond that with a child. And it's true, the kids get very upset when they lose
Now,
everything
the
all
problem is, I hate to do this because that's the only person that's agreed with me the whole half hour. These people are not children. I think the family are not
Right,
children.
they're not.
As we know, the parents are on their deathbed. We've learned that during the discussion.
During their deathbed.
Oh, yes,
They're
they are.
healthy teachers who are living the high life. They've retired, and they hold master's degrees.
Are you good at board games,
A
by the way?
texter thinks this is the perfect example of why the left lost the 2024 election.
It is. That's exactly what I was
think
going to
that's
say.
it, yeah.
Not. Are you good at board games?
I used to be
patience for
very
board
good. I used to be
games?
very good at backgammon. I
You
used
are?
to be
I don't know how to
very
play
good at
backgammon.
cards.
You are?
Yeah.
What card game?
Gin Rummy, Cootie, a game like a double
What?
solitaire. It's called Cootie,
I never
double
heard of that.
solitaire game. I used to be pretty good at cards.
How
I used
about
to
the
do
brain
card
power
tricks.
kinds of games? Like the Scrabble.
I don't know how to play chess.
I don't know how to play chess
No.
either. Scrabble?
I'm pretty
Any
good at
good
Scrabble. You good at Scrabble?
Yeah. We should play Scrabble, you and me.
Okay.
No, I'm serious.
Yep.
That'd be real.
You know what would happen if I won?
It'd be the end of the relationship. I mean, I'm honest enough to know that would be it. It'd be the end of the show, the end of everything. So maybe we shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
Okay.
Okay.
Dove, my apologies. Dove is in Dedham. Talk about alliteration.
Yeah.
Hey
Dove
there,
in
Dove.
Dedham.
How are you?
Hi, Dove.
Hi, it's Hebrew. But
What's that?
so I just wanted to call in to say I don't think either of them are necessarily, in the wrong here.
Why?
I think because from a family of very highly, educated, advanced education, with their masters and PhDs and whatever, and they come off sometimes as a little snobby.
Yeah.
Intentionally, and they try to rib in a way that they think is funny.
Yeah.
And in the end, sometimes comes off as a little snobby.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure it's necessarily an intentional fault of the family.
That's interesting. Dove, we got to let you go, not because your thoughts were not very insightful, because they were, but the connection is atrocious.
Okay.
So thank you very much.
A couple of texts here. Letting someone win Jim didn't work for Harriet Heinemann, who let Jim win.
That's exactly what she did. Exactly what she did.
That was Jim's girlfriend.
First of all, she was not my. Really.
She tried not to win because she wanted to win Jim's heart.
That is true. That part is true.
And it didn't work.
It's correct.
Yeah.
And she was not my girlfriend, by
Okay.
the way. She was a classmate of mine.
I'm a 40-year-old expat from Mississippi.
Oh, my God.
When my dear departed grandmother wanted to excuse others' bad behavior, she always said, "They just don't know any better." And that's what I say about the boyfriend and his family. Jim, bless your heart.
Okay, Jared, who's been on vacation for a month or whatever you've
I was
been,
gone for 3 days.
whatever it is back.
Oh, my God.
Who is the a-hole here, Jared? You're probably a board
Did you read
game
the one
type.
from
Are you a
Nicole?
board game player?
Ish.
Okay, fine. Who's the
So
a-hole?
it's the family.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if you're playing a game with me and I have a hint that you're throwing the game, I've lost all respect for you.
Oh my God!
There you
Now,
go.
see what
You can
Nicole,
never
our
come back.
colleague,
Look at
said?
this. Yeah.
Read that.
It's funny to hear all this because I am told, says Nicole, our staff member, that playing a tug of war with a dog, you have to let the dog win once in a while so they don't lose confidence in
Exactly.
themselves. Dogs and children, you have to let them win.
And parents who are on their deathbed. And that's those two parents
What
of
about
this
Harriet?
guy. Harriet, we don't even know. We've been trying to find Harriet for 30 years.
So what I heard from that
What is
was
this?
losing
Jim-
is the way to Jim's heart.
No,
Exactly.
well, it didn't get to my heart was the point. She
Oh.
lost, and
Didn't matter.
I went home with the Prayer Book Award, which was
Yeah.
the award for the fastest reader. And she was the fastest. It's a very sad story, actually.
It is a sad
I'm not going to
story.
go
Harriet
into it.
Heinemann.
Where you
Jim
been?
broke
I
her
wonder
heart.
where she lives now.
You want to tell us where you
She's
were?
like Miss
or no?
Haversham. She's still in the room with
Okay,
all the
fine.
with all the wedding clothes,
Where you
waiting for
been?
Jim to show up.
Where you been?
I was away. That's
Where?
where. That's
You're
where
not
I
telling
was.
us? Okay.
No.
He was in an undisclosed.
That's where I
He was in an
was.
I was
undisclosed
in a bunker.
location.
Did you watch the Tonys?
No, because I was away.
It was spectacular.
Was it? I
Just
know, and I was so
spectacular.
happy to see the ratings are up significantly.
Well, the whole show from the opening number was just, it was brilliant. What are you doing on your show today, which is starting in just exactly 3 minutes?
In a couple of minutes, we're going to be talking with the Museum of Fine Arts. So we've been doing this countdown to 2026. We've been working with the MFA to identify pieces in their collection that tell a different story about the American Revolution or untold stories about the American Revolution. So,
Great.
And our country's history. So we're talking about David Drake, once known as Dave the Potter. Now we know much more about him and what he did. We're going to be talking about Hello, Dolly, the musical that's playing right now in Boston, starring Amy Doherty and directed by Maurice Emmanuel Parent. And we'll get a preview of the Roxbury International Film Fest.
Oh, he's fabulous.
Maurice,
he is he's really talented character. Okay, that's it. Welcome back.
Game
Where are
night
we
is
going?
an ideal way to vet a relationship. You find out right away what you're dealing with, and you get out before it's too late.
I'm going to go Google Harriet now.
That's right.
I'm saying
Harriet
some-
Heinemann.
I am
That's her
eating
name.
gochujang chicken, where the recipe came from Christopher Kimball, our colleague.
Oh my God.
It's about as good as it gets.
He never makes a bad recipe.
Okay,
You
go ahead.
told me that.
That's
Okay.
it.
Thank you very much for tuning in today to Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 wherever our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're back at the Boston Public Library with BU disinformation researcher Joan Donovan for our media analysis segment, Press Play. She is amazing. You don't want to miss her. Plus, live music Friday, courtesy of the BAMS Fest performance. The Roots Alley Collective, GBH's Callie Crossley, is going to join us, as well as two organizers behind this week's Boston Pride for the People. Our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss. Additional support from Mia Harmon. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker, who told us in our ear three things today we didn't know, Jim. Yep. Patrick Lally runs our YouTube stream. Thank you to Patrick. And our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Stay tuned to Jared's Back, to the Culture Show, which begins as soon as we end right after.
Why won't he tell us where he was?
89.7 GBH. Okay, we need a couple more Topo Gijos to end this thing.
I'm not going to do that, Marjorie.
Thank you. That's actually a little better version. I'm Jim Browdy.
I'm Archer.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Insurance coverage from healthcare experts for businesses, individuals, families, and retirees. Mass General Brigham Health Plan.